Hello there, and welcome to our channel, where curiosity gets cozy and science takes the scenic route to slumber. Tonight we're wandering into the desert, not the kind that only glows beneath the sun, but the one that hums quietly beneath the stars. Somewhere out there, among dunes older than memory, stand shapes so familiar that even a child can draw them, and yet so mysterious that even the sharpest minds still hesitate before claiming to understand them. The pyramids, those colossal triangles rising from the sand like frozen echoes of another age. They have watched humanity change, fall, rebuild, and forget. And through it all, they've remained still, waiting, patient, as though time itself were their oldest companion. If you're joining from somewhere far away, perhaps wrapped in a blanket, or letting the evening slow your thoughts, I wonder where you are listening from tonight. Maybe the night is quiet where you are, or maybe you can hear the rain or the hum of a city. Either way, it's all part of the same Earth that built, dreamed, and puzzled over those massive structures by the Nile. Maybe it's night for you, as it is in our story now, or maybe it's morning, the kind of morning that would make the pyramids glow like embers in the rising sun. Whatever the hour, it's your moment in time, and somehow that ties us to them. Those silent stones that once marked the passing of days in a world far older than ours. If you find this gentle exploration soothing, intriguing, or just a quiet way to end your day, I'd be ever so grateful if you liked this video, maybe subscribed, and help this little corner of calm reach someone else who could use a moment of wonder. You never know. Perhaps someone else out there is also thinking about the pyramids right now, drifting through the same questions you are. Because what if the pyramids aren't just tombs or monuments or ancient puzzles of engineering? What if there's something more, something that remembers? What if, deep within their limestone layers, beneath chambers yet to be found, they hold the faint fingerprints of civilizations that came before Egypt? Lost worlds erased not by time, but by the forgetfulness of humanity itself. It's a thought that unsettles and soothes at once. The idea that history might be older than we think, that we might only be standing on the uppermost floor of a much taller tower. For most of us, when we picture the pyramids, we imagine the Great Pyramid of Giza, Khufu's masterpiece, perfectly geometric against the horizon, surrounded by smaller companions and watched over by the Sphinx, its weathered face half lion, half mystery. But if you were to stand before it now at dusk, when the desert light softens and the shadows stretch, it wouldn't feel like an artifact of human history. It would feel alive, immovable, yes, but breathing with heat and memory. There's something about being near a structure that has outlived languages, kings, empires, and perhaps even the very stars it was aligned with. And yet, for all we know about it, we understand so little. The pyramid has been measured, mapped, scanned, and studied by modern science. Every passage has been modeled, every stone weighed, every angle compared against the heavens. But despite all that, questions keep multiplying. Who were the first to dream this shape into being? Why build something that enormous, that precise, with tools no more advanced than copper chisels and ropes? And why align it so perfectly with the cardinal directions and the belt of Orion, as though its builders had not only an eye for the earth, but also for the stars? Archaeology tells us that the Great Pyramid was built around 4,500 years ago during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, around 2560 BCE. But as you might guess, not everyone agrees that's the full story. Some researchers and thinkers, both academic and independent, have wondered whether the pyramid might stand on foundations older than the pharaohs themselves. Could it be that what we call ancient Egypt was already inheriting a legacy from an even earlier world? A civilization erased by floods or cataclysm, leaving behind only fragments of its wisdom in the sands. To understand why people even ask such a question, we have to step back, far back into prehistory, before the first hieroglyphs were carved. Before the Nile was the lifeline of empires, back to a time when much of the Earth we know was locked in the last ice age. Back then, sea levels were lower, coastlines stretched farther, and what is now desert may once have been fertile plain. It's strange to think of Egypt, so defined by its sand, as once green and wet. But satellite scans and geological surveys show that much of the Sahara once held rivers, lakes, and even forests. When the climate shifted and the rains withdrew, people would have been forced toward the Nile, that one reliable thread of life running through the land. So maybe, long before pharaohs claimed divinity and built in stone, smaller societies were already thriving along those ancient riverbanks. Societies that mapped the skies, that counted the floods, that maybe, just maybe, built something durable enough to be remembered after the rest was lost. Because stone remembers, sand buries, and time, for all its erosion, can't quite erase everything. The idea that an advanced civilization could have existed before Egypt isn't mainstream science, but it's also not entirely outside the realm of curiosity. Geologists studying the weathering patterns on the Sphinx have debated for decades whether its erosion could have been caused primarily by wind and sand, as most Egyptologists say, or by heavy rainfall, which would date its original carving to a much wetter era, possibly thousands of years earlier. If that were true, it would place the Sphinx in a time before the Sahara was a desert, a time when humans, according to conventional history, were still scattered hunter-gatherers, not builders of monumental stone. The evidence is debated, often passionately, but the question itself keeps returning because there's something about the pyramids that doesn't feel accidental. They seem too deliberate, too enduring, too knowing, as if whoever built them wasn't merely honoring kings, but speaking to the cosmos in a language of angles and light. That sense of deliberate timelessness makes people wonder whether the pyramids were designed not just as tombs, but as memory machines, repositories of knowledge, geometry, and cosmic order meant to outlast civilizations themselves. Imagine that. A society aware that everything it knew, its stories, discoveries, its understanding of the world could one day vanish, and decided to encode that wisdom not in books or scrolls, but in stone. Massive, immovable, weatherproof stone, the kind of structure that even if buried under desert or swallowed by floodwaters could one day be found and still speak silently but clearly. That would make the pyramids not just monuments to the dead, but messages to the future. That possibility draws people in generation after generation. It's what keeps archaeologists, engineers, and dreamers returning to Giza, each trying to read the pyramid in a new way. Some look at the geometry, the precise ratio between height and base, which corresponds strikingly with the mathematical constant pi. Others point to the orientation, nearly perfect north alignment achieved without modern instruments. Still others notice that when viewed from above, the three main pyramids mirror the layout of Orion's belt with slight positional offsets matching the brightness of each star. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. If you think about it, these patterns wouldn't be hard to notice for people who live their lives under unpolluted skies. For ancient Egyptians, the night sky wasn't just decoration, it was a calendar, a map, a divine order written in starlight. To align a structure with the heavens was to connect Earth with the cosmic. Every sunrise, every star's transit had meaning. And so perhaps the pyramids were built not just as homes for the dead, but as bridges between worlds, between sky and sand, between gods and humans, between memory and eternity. It's humbling in a way to realize that these monuments were already ancient when some of the oldest cities we know were being founded. To imagine that by the time the Roman Empire rose and fell, the pyramids were already older than Rome itself would ever become. If they could think, if stone could remember, what would they make of us now? The tourists with cameras, the scientists with drones, the dreamers with questions that sound suspiciously like longing. When you strip away the myths, what's left is still awe. Because no matter how they were built, by whom or why, they are evidence of something distinctly human. The desire to endure, to leave a mark, to speak across millennia. And perhaps that's the real secret they hold. The proof that we've always wanted to be remembered, that the need to build something lasting, something beautiful, is part of what defines us as a species. Still, there's that lingering sense that we're missing something, that the pyramids are more than what we see. Modern technology, from ground-penetrating radar to muon tomography, has begun revealing voids and anomalies within the Great Pyramid, spaces that don't yet have explanations. Some call them new chambers, others natural gaps in the construction. Whatever they are, they remind us that even the most studied monument on Earth can still keep secrets. So maybe, just maybe, beneath the sands and the stone and the centuries, there's a story waiting. A story about who we were before we learned to write, before we named gods and drew maps, before we thought to measure time in years. A story the Earth itself has been keeping quietly, patiently in the dark. And as we move deeper into that story, as we trace the lines between myth and archaeology, we might start to see a different picture of our beginnings. Because every stone has a memory. Every civilization, no matter how great, leaves behind more than ruins. It leaves patterns, alignments, whispers that reach across eras. Maybe that's what the pyramids are doing. Whispering, not to be solved, but to be remembered. And somewhere between the wind over the dunes and the stars that have guided humanity for tens of thousands of years, that whisper continues as steady as breath. Now that we've arrived at the base of those ancient stones in the hush of a desert night, the question becomes not whether they were built by hands we know, but whether they were built by minds that saw the world differently. Minds that might have understood the earth and sky as one connected whole. And if that's true, then perhaps we've only begun to read the first line of a much older book. If you were to walk closer now, the scale of the stones would begin to shift your sense of proportion. From a distance, the Great Pyramid looks geometric, sharp and uniform, almost like a model cut from the horizon. But as you draw near, it stops being smooth and starts being immense. Each block, rough and weathered, is taller than your shoulders and heavier than your car. Millions of them, stacked with a precision that still challenges engineers. Up close, you can see that the pyramid isn't so much built as it is arranged with impossible patience. There's no mortar binding most of the blocks together. They simply fit edge against edge, joined by craftsmanship that feels more like intention than labor. The air changes around the stones. The temperature cools slightly, even under the Egyptian sun. The limestone breathes heat slowly, exhaling warmth hours after sunset. The smell of dust, faint salt, and dry minerals fills the air. Tourists often describe the same sensation, that standing near the pyramid feels oddly quiet, even when people are talking. Maybe it's the acoustics. Maybe it's the brain responding to scale. But something about its presence invites silence. That silence is what makes it powerful. Every age that's touched the pyramid has left a mark, faint graffiti from Roman soldiers, French explorers, British archaeologists, modern restorers. And yet the structure itself remains indifferent. It doesn't answer questions, it doesn't yield easily, it listens. The phrase "stone silence" might sound poetic, but here it feels literal. The pyramid seems to absorb sound, thought, and even the passing of time. You can imagine why early travelers described it as supernatural. When ancient Greek historians visited Egypt, they didn't know exactly how old the pyramids were, only that they seemed far older than anyone could comprehend. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, he spoke to priests who claimed the pyramids were already ancient when their grandfathers were young. To them, the builders were not mythical, but half-forgotten, people of another world, another order of time. Herodotus recorded stories of laborers, ramps, and taxes, but even he seemed unsure whether those explanations were enough. How could human hands, without iron, without wheels, create something so vast and enduring? He accepted the accounts, but the doubt lingers between his lines. Modern archaeology has offered answers, though never without friction. The mainstream understanding is that tens of thousands of workers, not slaves but skilled laborers, constructed the Great Pyramid over roughly 20 years. Excavations near Giza have uncovered worker villages with bakeries, breweries, and medical facilities, evidence that these people were organized and cared for, not forced into misery. Their diets included meat and beer, signs of valued labor. It paints a picture of national effort, a civilization unified under divine purpose. But even with those discoveries, the details of the construction still leave room for debate. How exactly were the stones lifted into place? Ramps are the most widely accepted theory, but which kind? A straight ramp would have needed to stretch for nearly a mile, requiring more material than the pyramid itself. A spiral ramp around the structure could have worked, but it would have hidden the edges, making precision alignment difficult. Some engineers propose internal ramps supported by traces of anomalies within the structure's density scans. Each idea works in principle, but none explains everything perfectly. The truth may be a combination of methods refined by generations of builders who learned from smaller pyramids before tackling the great one. Yet for all the practical explanations, something about the pyramid's perfection still unsettles the imagination. Its base deviates from true north by less than 1/20th of a degree. The sides are almost equal in length, differing by only a few km. Its proportions encode the ratio of Earth's radius to its circumference, a coincidence so striking that some believe it can't be accidental. Others argue that when you build on such a scale, coincidences are inevitable. The larger a structure, the more likely it is to echo natural harmonies without design. But that's the thing. Whether coincidence or design, the result feels deliberate. If you could strip away the dust of ages and restore the pyramid to its original form, you'd barely recognize it. It wasn't meant to look like the rough yellowish stone we see today. In its youth, the Great Pyramid was covered in polished white Tura limestone, so smooth it reflected the sun like a mirror. Its tip was probably capped with electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver that caught the light at sunrise and sunset. From miles away, it would have gleamed like a star fallen to earth. In a land where sunlight defined existence, it must have felt divine. That brilliance was not just beauty, it had meaning. The pyramid wasn't simply an object, it was a statement. Its shape, its orientation, its materials all carried layers of symbolism. The pyramid represented the primeval mound of creation, the first solid ground that emerged from the waters of chaos in Egyptian mythology. Its tip reached toward the heavens, uniting earth and sky. And because its sides faced the cardinal directions, it tied the structure to cosmic order, the ancient principle of Ma'at, balance, truth, harmony. Every angle was a prayer rendered in stone. Over time, of course, that meaning faded from cultural memory. By the time of later dynasties, the builders' methods were lost. Even ancient Egyptians living 1,000 years after Khufu could only guess at how the pyramids were raised. To them, those monuments were relics of divine ancestors. Some even believe the gods themselves had shaped them. It's strange to think that even in antiquity, the pyramids were already ruins of a golden age. They were already mysteries before Rome, before Greece, before writing had even reached much of the world. And yet, their silence never discouraged questions. It invited them. Every generation tried to interpret the pyramids in its own image. Medieval scholars thought they were granaries built by Joseph from the Bible. Renaissance thinkers saw them as symbols of geometry and divine proportion. During the Enlightenment, explorers treated them as puzzles to be solved with measurement and mathematics. Today, we see them as expressions of human ingenuity, but also as reminders that ingenuity alone doesn't explain everything. Part of the reason the pyramids persist in our imagination is their endurance. Most monuments fall apart faster than they're built. Palaces crumble, statues fade, even mountains erode. But the pyramids seem immune to decay. Earthquakes, floods, wars, looters, none have erased them. They've survived longer than any written record of their own construction. In a way, they outlasted their story. That's what makes them feel alien. Not because they are, but because humans rarely create things meant to last that long. When you think about it, even our modern world, with all its technology, rarely builds for eternity. We design for decades, maybe centuries, but not millennia. The pyramids remind us that once, long ago, a civilization aimed for permanence. They carved their ambition into the earth itself, trusting stone to speak when words failed. Perhaps they never imagined tourists with cameras. Perhaps they never needed to. The point wasn't to impress the future. It was to ensure that something of their world would remain when everything else vanished. There's something quietly unsettling in that. These people lived and died, their names mostly lost, their languages shifted, their gods forgotten, and yet their creation still casts a shadow at noon that no wind can erase. The stones don't remember their builders, but we do vaguely, collectively, through a fog of history. The pyramid keeps its silence, and we fill it with meaning. Maybe that's why it refuses to fade. Because every generation brings its own questions to it, and every question breathes life into its mystery. When scientists first mapped the internal structure of the Great Pyramid, they found chambers that no human had entered in over 4,000 years. Some passages remain sealed, blocked by granite plugs that were never removed. The known spaces, the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, are precise, almost mathematical in their design. Their alignments create resonance patterns that researchers still study today. Some frequencies inside the chambers amplify sound in ways that feel more like instruments than architecture. Whether that was intentional or incidental is unknown, but it adds another layer to the sense that the pyramid isn't just physical, it's experiential. The more we study it, the more it blurs the line between monument and machine. Its design is too deliberate to be random, but too mysterious to be fully decoded. That's why some researchers propose that the pyramid served multiple purposes: tomb, temple, calendar, symbol, and possibly even an instrument of measurement. Its geometry mirrors the curvature of the Earth. Its placement marks a near-perfect division of the planet's landmass between north and south. Its interior shafts align with specific stars. Taken together, it feels like something more than a royal tomb. It feels like a statement about existence itself. But if that was the intent, why make it so hard to read? Why hide its meaning behind silence and stone? Maybe that's the point. The pyramid was never meant to explain. It was meant to remind its builders and their descendants that mystery itself has value, that the act of wondering is as sacred as knowing. Perhaps they understood something we've forgotten, that permanence isn't just a matter of construction, but of meaning. And so, century after century, people keep returning to the base of the Great Pyramid. Pilgrims, scholars, mystics, engineers, each one hears something different in its silence. Some hear faith, others hear science, some hear nothing at all. And even that nothing feels profound. The pyramid doesn't care who is right. It just continues absorbing sunlight by day, moonlight by night, unmoved by our interpretations. Even in our era of satellites and artificial intelligence, we haven't exhausted it. Scans in recent years using cosmic ray muons have detected hidden cavities within the pyramid, voids that may be chambers or simply lighter sections of stone. One of these anomalies, called the Big Void, lies above the Grand Gallery, a space 30 meters long, large enough to fit an aircraft. Nobody knows what it's for. Some say it's a structural relief, others that it hides an undiscovered chamber. It's a reminder that even after 4 millennia of study, we're still learning that we don't know everything. Perhaps that's why the mystery refuses to fade. The pyramid never answers fully because its purpose depends on the questions we ask. When we seek proof of ancient wisdom, we find geometry. When we look for divine order, we find alignment. When we want to understand humanity's earliest achievements, we find evidence of ingenuity so vast, it humbles us. Whatever we're searching for, the pyramid reflects it back in silence, as though it were less a monument and more a mirror. And when you stand there, as the sun sets and the shadows stretch like long fingers across the sand, the silence grows heavier. You can almost hear the faint sound of wind moving between the blocks, like breath caught between centuries. The air cools, the color of the stone shifts from gold to gray to something nearly blue. Night arrives quickly in the desert, and the pyramid becomes less an object and more a silhouette, an idea carved against the horizon. In that darkness, it feels eternal. It's easy to see why myths cling to it. Some people say the pyramids hum, that on certain nights the wind creates tones that seem almost musical. Others swear that compasses behave oddly nearby, or that shadows fall at strange angles during solstices. Most of those claims fade under scrutiny, but the fascination doesn't. The human mind, faced with something so large, so old, so precise, can't help but search for purpose. The mystery of the pyramid is, in the end, the mystery of ourselves, our need to know, our fear of forgetting, our instinct to build. If the desert could speak, it might say that the pyramids are what happens when humans decide to argue with time, to carve permanence into impermanence, to build silence that speaks louder than words. And in that silence, beneath the stars, the stones continue to wait, not for discovery, not for worship, but simply to exist as they always have, unmoved, unbroken, undiminished. It's here, standing in that stillness, that the next question begins to form. Because if the pyramids are this ancient, this deliberate, this enduring, then what came before them? Who taught the first builders to shape stone like thought, to measure heaven on earth? Were they inventors of their own genius, or inheritors of a deeper, forgotten legacy? The answers, if they exist at all, are buried somewhere deeper still beneath the sand, beneath the centuries, waiting to be heard again. When people first began trying to date the origins of civilization, they assumed the timeline was simple. Hunter-gatherers became farmers. Farmers built villages. Villages grew into cities. And eventually, somewhere near the fertile curve of the Nile, civilization appeared. Neat, linear, and tidy. But the more we uncover, the less that story holds together. Something about it feels too recent, too compressed, as though the real beginning happened long before the first written record. Egypt, magnificent as it was, may have been inheriting something older, a memory half remembered, half reborn. The ruins of the earliest Egyptian settlements already show signs of a culture that arrived mature. Complex irrigation, symbolic art, organized leadership, and architecture that leaps from primitive huts to sophisticated tombs in what seems like a single lifetime. It's as if someone flipped a switch. One century, simple villages hug the riverbanks. The next, pyramids rise toward the horizon. That kind of leap makes scientists curious and sometimes uneasy because nature doesn't usually skip steps. Archaeologists call the earliest known Egyptian cultures the Badarian and Naqada periods, small communities that lived thousands of years before the pharaohs. They farmed, crafted pottery, buried their dead with care, and traded across great distances. But even these early groups show surprising complexity. Their art hints at mythologies already formed, their tools at methods already refined. When writing finally appeared around 3100 BCE, it wasn't crude or experimental. Hieroglyphs burst into existence with fully developed grammar and iconography. It's rare in human history for a writing system to arrive so complete. Most evolved slowly from scratches to symbols to full language. But Egyptian writing seems to have stepped onto the stage already dressed in gold. That's one of the reasons some researchers think Egypt's roots might reach deeper than we've dated. They wonder if there was a parent civilization, a culture lost to time that seeded these early ideas. It's a controversial thought because it brushes up against the boundary between archaeology and speculation. But it's not without hints. Around the world, similar patterns appear. Ancient sites that seem too advanced for their supposed age. Stone structures aligned with stars long before formal astronomy. Myths that describe floods, lost lands, and gods who taught architecture and agriculture before disappearing. In Egypt's case, those stories are woven into their religion. Their myths speak of a time before the dynasties, when gods walked the earth. They called that age Zep Tepi, the first time. In their legends, it was a golden era when knowledge, order, and cosmic balance were given to humanity. Later kings claimed to restore what had been lost since Zep Tepi, as if all of Egyptian civilization was a memory trying to reassemble itself. Scholars interpret that as myth, a symbolic way of describing the dawn of culture. But myths often preserve truth in poetic disguise. When a civilization remembers a first time, it may be echoing an era it can no longer date. An age whose ruins have been swallowed by sand and sea. If we follow those echoes farther back, the trail leads not just into Egypt, but into the broader story of early humanity. During the last ice age, much of the world looked different. Sea levels were lower by more than 100 Meussenderzemin. Entire continental shelves that are now underwater were once dry land. As the ice melted between 12 and 8,000 years ago, the seas rose and reshaped coastlines, drowning any settlements that might have existed along them. If people had built cities, farms, or monuments near those ancient shores, they would now be hidden beneath the waves. This isn't just theory. Archaeologists have already found submerged ruins off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean, stone walls, roads, and possible temple foundations, dated to times when those regions should have been underwater. None have yet shown evidence of a forgotten civilization comparable to Egypt. But they remind us that much of Earth's early story may be out of reach, lying in the deep silence of the ocean. Back on land, evidence continues to shift the timeline. Sites like Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey have rewritten what we thought we knew about prehistory. Built around 9600 BCE, thousands of years before the pyramids, Göbekli Tepe features massive carved stone pillars arranged in circles decorated with animal reliefs and abstract symbols. No one expected hunter-gatherers to build something so large or sophisticated. Yet there it stands, buried intentionally by its creators long before Egypt's first pharaoh drew breath. It suggests that the ability to organize labor, design architecture, and symbolize belief existed much earlier than we imagined. That discovery changed everything. If people could carve and align multi-ton stones 12,000 years ago, maybe Egypt's sudden rise wasn't so sudden. Maybe it was the revival of skills passed down through memory, myth, or migration. Perhaps the Nile's first architects were descendants of those who survived an earlier collapse, a people carrying fragments of forgotten knowledge, trying to recreate a world their ancestors once knew. Geologists studying the Sahara have found evidence that parts of it were lush savannas, with lakes as large as small seas just a few thousand years before Egypt's unification. Those regions could have supported advanced cultures long before the desert we know formed. When the climate shifted, those people would have migrated toward more fertile lands, likely following the Nile northward. That slow exodus might have carried not just survival instincts, but stories, designs, and ancient patterns of understanding. To a later generation, those migrants could have looked like teachers, bringing with them the memory of stars, geometry, and the divine order of building. The question then becomes, if such a pre-Egyptian civilization existed, why is there so little trace of it? The answer might be as simple as erosion, flood, and time. Most early architecture used mud, brick, wood, or softer stone. Without maintenance, those materials vanish within centuries. Only under rare circumstances, buried under sand or sealed by catastrophe, do traces survive. That's why when we find a site like Nabta Playa or Göbekli Tepe, it feels like a window cracked open just long enough to glimpse what came before. Nabta Playa, located in southern Egypt near the border with Sudan, is one of those windows. There in the heart of what's now desert, researchers discovered a stone circle older than Stonehenge. It dates to around 7000 BCE and aligns with the summer solstice, a clear sign of astronomical observation. The people who built it tracked the stars to predict seasonal rains, an early form of calendar making. It's modest compared to the Great Pyramid, but conceptually, it's the same idea, connecting earthbound life to the rhythm of the heavens. It's easy to imagine a line connecting those ancient sky watchers to the later builders of Giza. Not a direct lineage, perhaps, but an inheritance of curiosity, the kind that looks upward and sees not chaos, but pattern, the kind that believes the world is built on balance, and that if you can measure the heavens, you can mirror them on earth. That's what the pyramids might represent. Not the beginning of civilization, but its remembering. Of course, there's another perspective. Many archaeologists argue that Egypt's rapid rise wasn't due to lost ancestors, but to cultural evolution. Once agriculture stabilized along the Nile, surplus food allowed specialization. People could focus on craftsmanship, astronomy, administration. Innovation compounds quickly when people no longer struggle to survive each day. Within a few centuries, knowledge snowballs, and what looks like a leap is really just acceleration. It's a fair argument grounded in evidence, and yet the sense of inheritance remains. Egypt's art, architecture, and myths feel too complete, too confident for a society just finding its footing. It's like a song that begins mid-melody. Whatever the cause, the pattern is clear. Civilization doesn't always climb a steady ladder. Sometimes it stumbles, forgets, and rebuilds. Geological and archaeological records show multiple episodes of climate upheaval. Droughts, floods, volcanic winters, each capable of resetting human progress. After each collapse, survivors reorganized, carrying fragments of memory into the next age. So perhaps the story of Egypt is not the first chapter of civilization, but the latest retelling of an older one. A civilization out of step, rising before the world was ready to remember how to build again. Some researchers go further, connecting Egypt's earliest myths with flood legends from other cultures. The story of Atlantis, described by Plato, speaks of a powerful civilization destroyed by deluge. In Mesopotamia, Sumerian tablets tell of Ziusudra, a man who survived a great flood sent by the gods. A story that became the root of Noah's tale in later traditions. In Andean myths, the god Viracocha emerges after a world-ending flood to teach humanity the arts of civilization. These patterns repeat too often to ignore. Different lands, different names, but the same memory. A world lost to water followed by rebirth guided by survivors or gods. To the ancient Egyptians, the Nile's annual flood was not destruction, but renewal. It brought fertility, nourishment, and rhythm. Perhaps that's why their myths for the first time described creation emerging from water. They saw floods not as endings, but beginnings. In that sense, the pyramids themselves could be monuments to survival, symbols of stability rising from the waters of chaos, declaring that order had returned. The precision, the alignment, the permanence, all expressions of defiance against the memory of loss. Modern science, cautious as it must be, still entertains the possibility of unknown chapters in prehistory. New technologies are revealing landscapes hidden under deserts, jungles, and oceans. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and LiDAR scans have uncovered lost cities in the Amazon, Cambodia, and the Sahara. Places erased not by mystery, but by nature's patience. Egypt's deserts are vast, and much of it remains unexplored beneath shifting dunes. For all we know, the remnants of an older civilization could still rest there, waiting for the right storm or scan to reveal them. Even without evidence of a lost culture, the psychological pull of the idea remains powerful. Humans have an instinctive sense that we've forgotten something important. Maybe that's projection, maybe memory, or maybe both. When we see the pyramids so alien in their scale, so confident in their design, we can't help but wonder if they're reminders that others before us reached for permanence and paid the same price of obscurity. If a civilization did come before, it wouldn't necessarily mean advanced technology in the modern sense. No electricity, no steel, no machines. Advancement could mean something else entirely, a deeper understanding of geometry, astronomy, or the natural world. The kind of knowledge that could be lost if not written down. The kind that could survive only in myth, ritual, and design. The kind you might encode in a structure meant to outlast all words. And perhaps that's what we're really chasing when we talk about Earth's first civilizations. Not proof of alien intervention or mythical continents, but evidence that humanity has been rediscovering itself for longer than we thought. The pyramids in this light aren't just tombs, they're milestones in an ongoing dialogue between memory and forgetting. Every time we uncover something ancient, we're not just learning about them, we're remembering ourselves. Standing in front of the Great Pyramid, it's easy to feel that weight of inheritance. You look up, and the angle of its sides draws your gaze toward the sky, as if encouraging you to follow the same path its builders once did. The wind carries grains of sand across the stones, tiny movements against a monument built to defy time. You realize that the people who placed those stones weren't just building for their present. They were building for every future that would wonder who they were. And maybe that's the quiet truth beneath all the theories and debates. The pyramids endure not because of mystery, but because of intent. Someone thousands of years ago decided that their world deserved to be remembered. Even if the memory became myth, they may have stood at the edge of their own forgotten past, looking backward as we do now, listening to echoes that refuse to fade. They built not just to honor their kings, but to mark their place in a cycle they could sense but not define. A cycle of rise, fall, and rediscovery. That's what makes them timeless. They stand not at the beginning or the end of civilization, but somewhere in between, a midpoint between what was lost and what would come after, silent, patient, and enduring. And as we keep digging, scanning, and theorizing, we may find that the oldest secrets aren't beneath the pyramids, but within the questions they inspire. Because in the end, the oldest story on Earth might be this one, that we keep finding ourselves again, each time a little wiser, each time a little closer to remembering what the stones have known all along. If a person from our world were to step into ancient Egypt, perhaps the first thing they'd notice wouldn't be the pyramids themselves, but the silence between them. Not an empty silence, but the kind that feels like it's waiting for something to be understood. The desert has a way of preserving not just objects, but atmosphere. You could stand there and feel that those stones are saying something, though you can't yet tell what language they're using. Maybe that's because their language was never meant to be spoken. It was built. The pyramids are not just piles of stone arranged in impressive shapes. They are systems of meaning. Each block, each angle, each alignment carries intent. When we look at them today, we read them as architecture. But to their builders, they were closer to scripture. This wasn't a civilization that divided art, science, and religion into separate disciplines. To them, geometry was sacred, measurement was prayer, and symmetry was truth made visible. The pyramid spoke through proportion, through light, through shadow. Its meaning was not in words, but in balance. It's easy to underestimate how deeply symbolic their world was. The Egyptians didn't see themselves as inventing symbols. They believed they were revealing patterns already woven into existence. They watched the stars, the river, the seasons, and saw order everywhere. Their task was to participate in that order, not control it. That belief shaped everything they built. You can see it in their temples, in the way corridors align with sunrise on particular days, in the way inscriptions describe the journey of the soul as a voyage through light and darkness. The pyramid was the grandest expression of that idea, a monument that didn't just house the dead, but enacted the very process of transformation it described. To us, a tomb is a place of endings. To them, it was a threshold. The pyramid's interior passages were not random. They mapped a path from earth to sky, from physical to eternal. The shafts pointing towards specific stars were not decorative, but functional, guiding the king's soul toward the constellations associated with rebirth. The shape itself, that broad base narrowing to a single point, represented the ascent from the many to the one, from chaos to order. In that geometry, they found philosophy. The stone didn't just hold the body of a ruler, it embodied a world view. Inside, the air feels different. Those who've descended the narrow tunnels describe a hush that thickens as you go deeper. The walls press close, not oppressive but intimate, like entering the lungs of something vast and asleep. The granite blocks fit so tightly together that even today, thousands of years later, you can barely slip a knife blade between them. The sense of precision is unnerving. You can't help but feel that whoever built this space understood not only engineering, but acoustics, gravity, and resonance. The stones hum faintly when struck, and some researchers have noticed how certain frequencies echo more strongly in the chambers. Whether by design or coincidence, the structure seems tuned. That idea that stone can carry resonance fascinated both ancient and modern thinkers. In Egypt's own inscriptions, sound was considered a creative force. The god Thoth, patron of craftsmen and architects, was said to have spoken the world into being through words of power. To carve, to build, to shape, was to echo that divine act. So perhaps when the builders placed each block, they were participating in that same creation, embedding meaning not in symbols, but in vibration. In that sense, the pyramid wasn't a static object. It was a frozen song. When light strikes the stones at sunrise or sunset, it completes the music. The surfaces catch the glow and scatter it across the desert in a slow-moving pattern. During equinoxes and solstices, the shadows fall in specific ways that seem almost choreographed. The sun, the earth, and the pyramid move together in a rhythm too slow for the human body to feel, but not too slow for the human mind to notice. Those alignments were no accident. They reveal how closely the builders observed the heavens. The pyramid sides are tilted at an angle of about 51 degrees, a geometry that mirrors the slope formed when you project a square's perimeter into height, a perfect balance of form and function. To the Egyptians, this wasn't mathematics. It was harmony made visible. Imagine standing at Giza thousands of years ago before erosion and earthquakes softened the edges. The casing stone is still intact, blinding white in the sun, the capstone shining like fire. At dawn, the first light would ignite the tip and slide downward in a slow cascade until the entire structure burned gold. That moment wasn't just a spectacle. It was a ritual. The rising of the sun, the rebirth of light reflected in the rising of the pyramid itself. Every morning, the monument performed the story of creation anew, speaking through brilliance instead of sound. The Egyptians had a word for this concept: ma'at. It meant truth, balance, and the rightness of things. It was not just moral law, but cosmic alignment. To live in Ma'at was to live in accordance with the universe. The pyramid was Ma'at in stone. Its flawless symmetry, its orientation to the cardinal directions, its harmony with the cycles of the sun, all of it embodied that principle. For them to build such a structure was to reaffirm that order existed, that chaos had not won. That's what makes the pyramid so different from the monuments of later cultures. They weren't meant to dominate the landscape, they were meant to participate in it. Each was placed with awareness of the horizon, the river, the stars. The Giza Plateau itself forms part of a greater map when viewed from above. Some researchers note that the three major pyramids align not just with Orion's belt, but with key celestial meridians, as though the builders were inscribing a piece of the sky onto the ground. Whether or not every alignment was intentional, the mindset behind it was clear. They were translating the cosmos into architecture. That translation required knowledge, not just of geometry, but of observation. The ancient Egyptians measured time not by clocks, but by the movement of the stars. They divided the night sky into decans, groups of stars that rose at regular intervals, allowing them to track hours long before mechanical timekeeping. They knew the length of the solar year, the tilt of the Earth's axis, and the pattern of planetary motions. Their calendars synchronized with the annual flooding of the Nile, the heartbeat of their world. To encode all of that into stone was a statement of mastery, not over nature, but in harmony with it. And yet, there's something more subtle happening within that stone language. The builders didn't leave blueprints or explanations. They didn't need to. The pyramid's message wasn't directed to its contemporaries. It was aimed at time itself. Every line, every alignment was a way of saying, we were here and we understood. They knew that words erode, that languages shift, that even memory fades. But mathematics, proportion, and starlight, those are universal. Anyone in any age could look at that geometry and recognize intent. In that way, the pyramid speaks across civilizations, across millennia, in a dialect of order. When explorers from the modern world first entered the Great Pyramid's chambers, they found no treasure, no inscriptions, no overt messages, just space, angles, and stone. To many, that emptiness felt anticlimactic. To others, it felt profound. The absence itself was communication, a silence that said, "Look deeper." The builders didn't decorate the interior because they didn't need to. The structure was the message. Every measurement, every echo, every shaft of light told its own story. They didn't need to speak because they had already said everything that mattered through precision. Over centuries, that silent speech has been translated and retranslated. Mathematicians see in it a treatise on geometry. Architects see a manual on balance and load. Astronomers find a record of celestial motion. Philosophers see metaphor, the ascent toward truth. And those seeking mystery find plenty of room for it. The pyramid accommodates them all because it doesn't insist on one interpretation. Its language is open-ended, adaptable, alive. It's strange to think that something so massive could be so subtle. But that's the paradox of the pyramids. The louder we study them, the quieter they seem to become. Every measurement reveals precision, but not purpose. Every discovery answers one question and opens two more. It's as if the structure was designed to remain slightly out of reach, always one step beyond full comprehension. That quality, the balance between revelation and concealment, is what keeps the pyramid alive as an idea. The same principle can be seen in their hieroglyphs. Egyptian writing wasn't purely phonetic. It was symbolic, layered with meaning. A single sign could represent a sound, an object, or a concept, depending on context. The same applied to architecture. A pyramid could be a tomb, a cosmic mountain, a mathematical theorem, and a spiritual machine all at once. The culture didn't draw hard lines between those categories. To them, reality itself was multidimensional. The visible and the invisible coexisted. So when they built in stone, they weren't just constructing matter, they were arranging existence. Even the materials had significance. Limestone symbolized purity and light. Granite represented durability and strength. Gold was the flesh of the gods. Each was chosen not just for its physical properties, but for what it meant. When the builders used red granite for the king's chamber, they weren't just selecting a sturdy material, they were invoking vitality and eternal power. Every substance, every texture was part of the message. You can still feel it today. The moment you step inside, the world outside fades. The light narrows to thin beams from electric lamps or torches bouncing off smooth stone. The temperature drops. Your footsteps echo differently depending on where you stand, as if the building is listening. You notice how the air feels heavier, though you can't say why. In that quiet, the distinction between structure and presence blurs. You begin to understand that this place wasn't built to be seen. It was built to be felt. And perhaps that's the truest way to read the pyramid's language, not with the mind, but with the body. The rhythm of steps through narrow halls, the tilt of your head upward toward the ceiling, the hush that settles in your chest. It's all part of the message. The architecture guides you through an experience of transformation, from wide to narrow, from light to dark, from human scale to something vast. You emerge not with information, but with perspective. That's the genius of a language built without words. It doesn't rely on translation or explanation. It bypasses intellect and speaks directly to perception. Whether you're an ancient priest or a modern traveler, the pyramid invites the same response: wonder, humility, curiosity. It doesn't need to persuade you of anything. It just stands there, quiet, certain, patient. And maybe that's why, after thousands of years, it still holds power, because deep down, humans still understand that kind of communication. We still build monuments, write equations, compose music, and stare at the stars for the same reason: to connect. The pyramid is part of that lineage, a message from a person who spoke to the universe through stone and silence. It makes you wonder how much of that understanding we've kept and how much we've forgotten. We live surrounded by words, signs, and signals, but rarely do we build meaning into the form the way they did. The pyramid reminds us that the truest language doesn't need explanation. It needs intention. Each angle, each proportion, each line of shadow is a sentence written for anyone patient enough to listen. As the night deepens around Giza and the stars reclaim their ancient positions above, the pyramid's language becomes clearer, not in sound, but in alignment. Orion rises where it always has. Sirius gleams toward the horizon. The air cools, the desert quiets, and the stones begin their slow conversation with the sky. Whatever message they're sending has been repeated for thousands of years, steady and calm, indifferent to whether we understand it or not. And somewhere in that endless dialogue between heaven and earth, a truth hums quietly, that maybe understanding was never the goal. Maybe the pyramid's builders weren't trying to tell us something specific, but to remind us how to listen to proportion, to silence, to the slow pulse of the planet beneath our feet. Because sometimes the oldest languages aren't written in words at all. They're carved in patience, built in light, and carried through time by stone that still remembers. The sand outside shifts in the wind. The moon climbs higher. The pyramid stands unchanged. And as the desert breathes around it, the language of stone continues unbroken, waiting for whoever will learn to read it again. When we talk about the pyramids, it's easy to imagine them as inevitable, as if they were destined to appear simply because Egypt existed. But the truth is more human than that and more astonishing. They didn't build themselves. They didn't rise by magic or by myth. They were made by hands, human hands, calloused, sunburned, tireless, each one lifting, cutting, hauling, adjusting, and returning the next morning to do it again. The story of the pyramids isn't just one of architecture, it's one of endurance. For centuries, the world pictured the builders as slaves, faceless masses forced to labor beneath whips in the burning sun. That image, carried through films and old writings, made the pyramids seem like monuments to oppression. But archaeology has quietly rewritten that story. Excavations near the Giza Plateau have uncovered workers' villages complete with bakeries, storage houses, tools, pottery, and even medical supplies. The bones found there show signs of healed injuries, suggesting care and treatment. These were not expendable slaves. They were organized teams of skilled workers, stonecutters, haulers, architects, engineers, and laborers, all contributing to something larger than themselves. They left graffiti inside the pyramids, simple inscriptions scrawled in red paint, names of work crews like the Drunkards of Menkaure or the Friends of Khufu. They had pride, humor, and identity, and you can almost picture them during a rest break, wiping dust from their faces, joking, aware that what they were building might outlive them all. They were building for eternity. The logistics alone defy imagination. The Great Pyramid contains over 2 million limestone blocks, each weighing an average of 212 tons, with some interior stones exceeding 70 tons. Moving them from quarry to construction site would have required planning on a scale that rivals modern infrastructure projects. Yet they did it without iron, without cranes, without wheels strong enough for the task. They had copper tools, wooden sledges, ropes, and an unyielding sense of purpose. How they managed to move those stones remains a subject of fascination. In 2014, archaeologists studying wall carvings in the tomb of Jehutihotep, an Egyptian noble, found a depiction of workers hauling a colossal statue on a sled with a man pouring water over the sand in front of it. That detail, once overlooked, turned out to be crucial. Physicists later demonstrated that wetting the sand reduced friction by nearly half, making it easier to drag heavy loads. The Egyptians might not have known the exact mechanics, but they knew through experience that the right amount of moisture made the sand firm enough to bear weight. It was simple, effective, and brilliant. That same blend of observation and adaptation runs through every part of their work. They quarried limestone locally, but the red granite used in the inner chambers came from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers to the south. Transporting those massive blocks would have involved floating them down the Nile during the flood season, when the water reached closest to the site. The river wasn't just a source of life, it was their highway. They used it to move not just stone, but grain, wood, and tools, synchronizing their efforts with nature's rhythm. Imagine the scene along the river, long lines of workers guiding rafts loaded with stone. The sound of voices calling in rhythm, the slap of water against wood. On the horizon, the pyramid rises slowly, layer by layer. The desert around it vibrates with activity. At the site, ramps spiral upward, pulleys creak, levers strain, and thousands of coordinated movements turn chaos into order. There's something almost orchestral about it. No single person could see the whole picture, but everyone's motion contributed to the same steady climb toward the sky. It's tempting to call that genius, and it was, but it was also continuity. Each generation of builders inherited lessons from the last. Before the Great Pyramid, there were earlier attempts, smaller step pyramids, collapsed prototypes, and partial experiments. The first true pyramid at Meidum began as a step design and was later smoothed into the shape we now recognize. Then came the bent pyramid at Dashur, which changes angle halfway up, perhaps because the builders realized the original slope was too steep. Those failures and adjustments were the foundation for Khufu's success. By the time Giza's great monument began, the Egyptians had learned what worked and what didn't. The miracle isn't that they were built perfectly once. It's that they learned how to build perfectly through trial and patience. Still, there are moments where their precision feels almost impossible. The base of the Great Pyramid is leveled to within a few centimeters across an area larger than many modern city blocks. Its sides are aligned almost exactly with the cardinal directions. True north, south, east, and west, more accurately than many modern buildings achieved with compasses. How did they do it? Without modern tools, they likely relied on simple instruments, plumb lines, sighting rods, and shadow measurements. By observing the movement of stars, particularly the circumpolar ones that never set, they could determine north with remarkable accuracy. It wasn't magic, it was observation honed into mastery. And yet that mastery can still feel like magic. When modern engineers attempt to replicate their methods, even with heavy machinery, it's rarely easy. The scale introduces challenges we often forget. A 2-ton block might seem manageable until you multiply it by millions. Every small error, every uneven layer, every misplaced degree compounds. But the Egyptians avoided those mistakes. Their alignment and symmetry persisted through 90 courses of stone, each laid by hand, each checked by eye. That level of consistency suggests not just intelligence, but unity of purpose. A workforce synchronized not by machinery, but by shared vision. There's a kind of humility in that. The workers didn't sign their names. The architects didn't carve their faces on the walls. The pharaoh's name remains, but the people who made his vision possible are anonymous, and yet their fingerprints are still there, pressed into mortar, carved into the undersides of stones. Every layer of the pyramid holds traces of hands that were shaped, lifted, and adjusted until it was right. Those fingerprints are the closest thing we have to meeting the builders themselves. It's easy to look at the pyramids and see mystery, to wonder if some lost technology or outside intervention made them possible. People have speculated about everything from forgotten machines to help from visitors beyond Earth. It's an idea that arises whenever we encounter evidence of ancient genius that feels beyond our reach. But the truth may be even more impressive if it's human alone. Because if they did all of this with simple tools, rope, and mathematics, it means we've underestimated not just their abilities, but the potential of the human mind when united by purpose. Still, it's worth asking whether there were tools or techniques we've simply lost. After all, history isn't a straight line of progress. Knowledge can vanish, libraries burn, empires fall, skills fade when they're no longer needed. We see that in countless trades, crafts once common that now require rediscovery. If Egypt's builders possessed mechanical insights or methods passed down orally, those could have disappeared long before anyone thought to record them. The tools may have been simple, but their application could have been sophisticated beyond our assumptions. One theory suggests that the Egyptians used counterweights, sand-filled bags, or shifting platforms to lift stones incrementally. Another proposes that they used levers in series, raising each block in stages. There's even speculation that they built internal spiral ramps within the pyramid, dismantling them as they went, leaving only the final structure. Each hypothesis adds another possibility to the mosaic of ingenuity. What's remarkable is that so many methods could have worked. The pyramids are proof that intelligence doesn't depend on technology. It depends on persistence. The deeper question, though, is why? Why invest so much effort, so much labor in such immense structures? Practical explanations point to religion and power. The pharaohs were divine rulers, and the pyramids served as both tombs and symbols of their eternal connection to the gods. But beneath that, there's a universal motive, the human desire to endure. When people build beyond necessity, when they create something that outlives them, they're expressing a kind of defiance against impermanence. The pyramid may have begun as a royal project, but it became a collective assertion that humanity could shape time itself. Each stone placed was a gesture of faith, faith that the structure would stand, that it would matter, that future eyes would see and remember. And we did. We're still looking, still wondering. The builders may not have known our languages or our machines, but they knew us in some deeper way. They knew that curiosity is timeless. They knew that when we encountered their work, we would ask how and why and what it meant. In that sense, their labor was a message as much as a monument. Even now, scientists studying micro-details of the pyramid's construction find evidence of surprising methods. The precision with which blocks were cut and fitted suggests an understanding of surveying and geometry that would challenge modern apprentices. Some cuts are so fine that even with contemporary diamond tools, replicating them exactly would take time and care. Yet the Egyptians did it at scale across millions of pieces. It's a reminder that progress isn't always linear. Sometimes knowledge appears, peaks and recedes, leaving behind artifacts that make us question our assumptions. When you picture those workers again, the teams pulling ropes, the foremen shouting over the wind, the stonemasons chiseling edges smooth, it's worth remembering that they weren't thinking about us. They weren't thinking about the future in abstract terms. They were thinking about the next stone, the next layer, the next measure of alignment. Each task was immediate, tangible, physical, and yet collectively their work became immortal. That's the paradox of great creations. The small actions of the present build the permanence of the future. There's a detail that lingers in many travelers' accounts. The idea that when you stand at the base of the Great Pyramid, the scale doesn't make you feel small but included. The stones rise not to intimidate, but to invite. Each block represents human effort, visible and comprehensible. You can imagine yourself placing one, then another, until suddenly you've built something that touches the sky. It's overwhelming, but also comforting. It suggests that greatness isn't the work of a few, but of many. That realization changes how we think about the pyramids. They stop being relics of mystery and become records of cooperation. Tens of thousands of people working with a single goal, guided by knowledge, belief, and an unbroken rhythm of movement. In that sense, the real marvel isn't the pyramid itself, but the society that built it. A civilization so organized, so motivated, that it could turn human will into geometry. And yet, there's still something intangible about it, something that feels just out of reach. Perhaps it's the simplicity of their tools, contrasted with the complexity of their results. Perhaps it's the awareness that even with all our machines, we would struggle to replicate what they achieved. That feeling keeps the door open for mystery, not supernatural, but human. A reminder that genius isn't measured by technology, but by imagination. If we could step back in time and watch the builders at work, we might be surprised by how ordinary it looked. Men and women using levers, sledges, chisels, ropes, dust rising, commands shouted, songs sung to keep rhythm. But hidden in that ordinary scene would be extraordinary focus. Each adjustment, each measurement, each gesture of cooperation was part of a language that didn't need words. It was the same language that shaped the stones, the same that aligned the stars. The language of doing, of making, of believing. And as the final stone was set, as the last echo of hammer against granite faded into silence, the builders might not have cheered. They might have simply stepped back and looked up, realizing that they had created something that would outlast their names, their lifetimes, their world. Their hands, though gone, are still there in every line of the structure. The pyramid is their memory, not of kings or gods, but of themselves, of what human hands can achieve when guided by unity and purpose. The desert wind continues to move around the stones, soft and unending. Each grain of sand brushing against the surface carries the same quiet rhythm that once echoed through the builders' hearts. Generation after generation, their work remains untouched by time's indifference. And as we stand before it, we realize that perhaps the real secret of the pyramids isn't lost technology or divine intervention. It's us, the human capacity to imagine something greater than ourselves and make it real. One stone, one breath, one heartbeat at a time. The stars rise again above Giza. Their light touches the tip of the pyramid just as it did thousands of years ago. Somewhere beneath that glow, the memory of the builders persists, not in bones or names, but in geometry, in the alignment of earth and sky. The structure they raised still hums with their intention, a resonance that refuses to fade. And as we look upon it, the question deepens, stretching beyond how they built it, into why they believed it mattered. Because what they built wasn't just a monument, it was a mirror reflecting the timeless truth that the desire to create, to endure, to reach upward is written into us, and that truth will guide us forward just as surely as it guided them into the next discovery, the next question, the next layer of stone waiting to be set. When night falls over Giza, the air cools just enough for the desert to breathe again. The stars rise with quiet certainty, and in that vast stillness, the pyramids seem to come alive in a different way. During the day, they belong to the earth, stone, dust, heat and shadow. But when darkness deepens, they belong to the sky. The sand reflects starlight faintly, and the sharp lines of each pyramid draw the eye upward, as if guiding the imagination into the constellations. It's then that their real design begins to make sense. These were not built only for the ground. They were built to echo the heavens. For as long as we've studied them, people have noticed that the pyramids seem to hold a conversation with the stars. Their positions on the plateau are not random. The three great pyramids, Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure, form a pattern that mirrors Orion's belt, the three stars that dominate the winter sky. The match isn't perfect, but it's precise enough to be striking. The largest pyramid aligns with the brightest star, Alnitak. The middle pyramid corresponds to Alnilam, and the smallest to Mintaka. Even their offset matches the star alignment as it appeared thousands of years ago. To most ancient Egyptians, Orion wasn't just a constellation, it was Osiris, the god of resurrection, order, and eternal life. When they looked at the night sky, they didn't see random lights, they saw gods moving in their eternal cycles. The souls of kings were believed to join those gods after death, ascending from earth to the heavens to live among the stars. The pyramids, aligned as they are, might have been designed to make that journey tangible, to map the passage from mortality to eternity. If that sounds symbolic, it also happens to be mathematically precise. The Great Pyramid's sides face the cardinal directions with astonishing accuracy. Its northern side deviates from true north by less than 4 minutes of arc. A level of alignment so exact that even with modern equipment, replicating it on that scale would be difficult. The question is how they did it. The Earth's magnetic north shifts over time, so compasses would have been useless. Instead, they must have used the stars. Most likely, they relied on the circumpolar stars, the ones that never set below the horizon. By observing where those stars crossed at their highest and lowest points in the night sky, they could mark a true north-south line. That technique would have required patience and accuracy, but it was within their reach. The builders didn't need telescopes, only a steady hand, a fixed sighting tool, and the discipline to watch the sky night after night. To them, astronomy wasn't a luxury. It was the foundation of order itself. The Egyptians lived by the rhythm of the heavens, the flooding of the Nile, the cycles of planting and harvest, the measurement of time. All were tied to celestial motion. When Sirius, the star they called Sothis, rose just before dawn in midsummer, it signaled the coming flood. That moment marked the start of their year. The stars didn't just guide their agriculture, they defined their worldview. Everything they built, from temples to tombs, was aligned with cosmic precision. The pyramids were the ultimate expression of that harmony, architecture as astronomy, stone as calendar, geometry as theology. If you could travel back to when the pyramids were first built and stand there at dawn, you'd see the same stars the builders did. You'd watch Orion set along the horizon while Sirius rose. You'd notice how the shafts inside the Great Pyramid point toward those same stars. The southern shaft from the King's Chamber aims almost exactly at Alnitak in Orion's belt, while the northern shaft points toward Thuban, the pole star of that era. These alignments weren't decorative. They were deliberate pathways, channels of meaning linking the earth to the sky. The pharaoh's spirit, according to belief, would ascend through those passages to join the gods. It's a powerful image, not metaphorical, but mechanical in its precision. To build such a connection required more than belief. It required measurement, memory, and discipline. The Egyptians had none of our instruments, yet they tracked celestial cycles with accuracy that would impress modern astronomers. They recorded solstices and equinoxes, predicted the heliacal rising of stars, and designed temples that caught sunlight exactly where they intended, even centuries later. In doing so, they demonstrated something more profound than technical skill. They demonstrated understanding. And yet, as we try to decode their methods, we keep encountering the same feeling, that they were seeing the world through a lens we've partly lost. We think of the sky as something distant, abstract, decorative. To them, it was the living order of the cosmos, visible and dependable. The stars were not random dots, they were laws. Their motion revealed structure, pattern, and permanence. To mirror that in stone was to bring heaven down to earth, to give shape to the unseen. That desire to build according to the heavens is not unique to Egypt, but Egypt took it to its most refined form. Across the world, ancient builders aligned monuments with solstices, equinoxes, and cardinal directions. But no other civilization combined such precision with such scale. The pyramids, in their vast simplicity, became the bridge between astronomy and architecture. Every line, every angle, every shadow is a reminder that the people who built them were thinking in terms of the universe. You can see that same thinking in their temples. At Abu Simbel, far to the south, sunlight penetrates the temple's inner sanctum only twice a year, illuminating the statues of God seated within. The precision required to achieve that over a distance of 60 mountains carved into rock is staggering. The same spirit guided Giza. The pyramid's edges trace solar and stellar paths, each one tuned to cosmic timing. The builders weren't guessing. They were calculating, observing, and recording. When you stand before the pyramids at night, you can feel that connection. The horizon glows faintly, and the constellations move so slowly that they seem almost still. The pyramid's apex points toward the invisible axis around which the sky appears to rotate. It's as though the structure and the heavens are locked together in a quiet dialogue, one responding to the other in perfect rhythm. That rhythm is what the builders captured, not a moment, but eternity measured in light. The symmetry of the pyramids isn't just visual, it's philosophical. In their culture, symmetry represented harmony, the balance of opposites, the reconciliation of dualities. The Nile divided their land into east and west, life and death, sunrise and sunset. The east was for the living, the west was for the dead. The pyramids rise on the west bank where the sun sets, symbolizing the journey beyond life. But their alignment to the cardinal points ensures that even in death, the pharaoh's resting place remains in balance with the cosmos. The pyramid, in that sense, isn't a structure of stone. It's a compass of eternity. That same idea extends downward into the ground. Beneath the plateau, tunnels and tombs follow geometric order. Even the layout of the workers' village reflects a deliberate plan oriented toward the monuments. Nothing was arbitrary. Every part of the landscape participated in the same system of symmetry. It's as if the entire plateau was designed as a single instrument. Each component resonates with the others, all tuned to the same cosmic key. The more you study that design, the more it feels like a blueprint, not just of architecture, but of thought. The builders didn't separate engineering from philosophy. For them, building well meant building rightly, in accordance with truth, with Ma'at. The pyramid's proportions reflect that pursuit of perfection. The ratio between its height and the perimeter of its base mirrors the relationship between a circle's radius and circumference, the number we call pi. Whether intentional or coincidental, that relationship ties the pyramid to the mathematics of nature itself. To encode such harmony into stone suggests a worldview that saw no boundary between physical and spiritual truth. If you walk along the base of the Great Pyramid, you can feel that intention in its geometry. Each corner is slightly higher than the center, creating a subtle convex curve that corrects for optical illusion. To the naked eye, the sides appear perfectly straight, even though they're not. The builders anticipated perception and adjusted reality to preserve balance. That's not luck, that's knowledge of how the human mind sees. They understood proportion not only as mathematics, but as experience. This blend of science and awareness feels modern, yet it's ancient. The builders didn't just copy the stars, they engaged with them. They turned cosmic observation into architecture that teaches by being. You don't need to understand astronomy to sense that the structure is ordered. The symmetry speaks directly to something fundamental in perception. The same instinct that finds comfort in balance and meaning in pattern. The pyramid doesn't demand belief. It shows you balance and lets you feel it. And maybe that's the true genius of its design. It doesn't impose, it reflects. It mirrors both the universe above and the observer below. To look at it is to see the proportion that feels right. Even if you can't explain why, that rightness, that quiet correctness, is the pyramid's language of truth. It doesn't whisper secrets, it simply exists in perfect agreement with the world that made it. Over the centuries, the desert has shifted around the pyramids, burying and revealing them in turns. Sand has crept into cracks, wind has softened edges, earthquakes have loosened stones, yet their symmetry remains. Even when eroded, even stripped of casing, they hold their form. That endurance isn't just structural, it's conceptual. The blueprint survives because it's written in the language of nature. Proportion, alignment, repetition, those things don't age. Modern researchers using satellite imagery have discovered that the Giza complex aligns not only with celestial coordinates, but with geological ones. The plateau's bedrock itself forms a natural foundation that follows the lines of the pyramid bases. The builders didn't fight the landscape, they incorporated it. In doing so, they bound the man-made and the natural into a single stable system. The result is a monument that has survived earthquakes, floods, and the rise and fall of civilizations without shifting from its purpose. When you think about it that way, the blueprint isn't just mathematical, it's ecological. The pyramids exist in balance with the Earth's surface, not against it. They absorb temperature changes, deflect wind, and rest on foundations that distribute weight evenly across natural strata. The builders didn't just build on Earth, they built with it. That insight changes how we interpret them. The pyramids are often seen as isolated symbols of ambition, but they might be the opposite, expressions of harmony. The builders were not trying to conquer nature, but to express its order through human design. That's why their structures feel timeless. They are scaled versions of the world's own geometry. And as you stand there at night watching the stars shift over the pointed silhouettes, it's easy to understand why the builders looked upward for guidance. The stars are constant but changing, fixed yet moving, silent yet full of meaning. The same could be said of the pyramids. Each reflects the other. Both are patterns written in permanence. The desert grows still, the wind softens, and somewhere near the horizon, Orion tilts slightly, its belt angled just as it was when the first stones were set. This same alignment that guided ancient eyes now guides ours. In that moment, time feels less like a line and more like a circle. The stars rise, fall, and return. The sand shifts and settles. The symmetry remains. The blueprint written in the sky is not a mystery to be solved, but a relationship to be remembered. The connection between what we build and what we see, between the ground we stand on and the heavens we imagine. The Egyptians understood that balance so well that they didn't need to explain it. They simply built it, confident that one day someone would look up, follow the lines, and understand that stone and starlight speak the same language. The air cools further, and the last of the daylight disappears. The pyramids fade into silhouettes, but their orientation doesn't change. They still point exactly where they always have, toward the eternal, unchanging reference points in the night sky. It's as if they were never meant to be seen by sunlight at all, but by starlight. A dialogue between sand and infinity, geometry and eternity. A blueprint that was never drawn, only discovered, waiting quietly in the rhythm of the cosmos for human hands to make it real. The desert wasn't always dry. Long before the pyramids, before the pharaohs, before the Nile carved its familiar path, this land was green. Lakes shimmered where sand now lies. Rivers threaded through valleys that today are silent. And rain fell often enough to shape everything we now call ancient. When the first builders looked out across the plateau, they stood on ground that had already lived a dozen different lives. What they saw as desert had once been a garden, and in some small, persistent way, it remembered. Geologists studying the Sahara have found evidence of a dramatic transformation. Around 12,000 years ago, this region was alive with vegetation. Monsoon rains swept northward, filling basins with fresh water and feeding vast networks of lakes. But then slowly the climate shifted, the rains retreated, lakes evaporated, the soil hardened into dust. People living in these regions were forced to move, following the remaining water toward the Nile. That migration shaped history. It also shaped memory. When humans move under pressure, they carry their stories. They remember the places they left behind, the disasters they escaped, and the losses they couldn't name. Over time, those memories blur, turning into legend. The Egyptian myth of creation begins not in desert but in water. Before the first land rose, they said, there was only the primordial flood, a boundless sea of chaos. From it emerged a mound, the first solid ground, and upon that ground creation began. The pyramid shape mirrors that idea. The earth rising from the flood, reaching for the light. It's a story of beginnings, but maybe it's also a memory of endings, because if we step beyond Egypt, we find that same story everywhere. In Sumer, in India, in Greece, in the Americas, nearly every ancient culture remembers a flood, a deluge that came suddenly, destroying worlds, erasing cities, leaving only a few survivors to start again. Scholars have long debated whether those stories arose independently or share a common origin. The simplest answer is that floods are universal experiences. Rivers overflow, storms rage, seas rise. But when so many myths agree not just on the flood, but on the scale of it, the global civilization-ending scale, it begins to sound like memory, not metaphor. Modern science offers its own version of that story. At the end of the last ice age, around 11,000 years ago, the Earth began to warm. Ice sheets melted, and sea levels rose more than 100 meters worldwide. In geological terms, it happened quickly. Within a few centuries, entire coastal plains disappeared under the sea. Islands became archipelagos. What had been home to countless people turned into ocean floor. If those people had built villages, temples, or early cities, their remains would now lie hidden beneath the waves, unreachable and unseen. It's easy to see how such an event could leave a permanent mark on human memory. If people watching their world vanish wouldn't forget, they would tell their children. Those children would tell theirs. The details would blur, but the shape of the story would stay the same. Over time, myth would become the container for memory, and so we inherited tales of floods sent by gods, of worlds cleansed and renewed, of survivors who carried knowledge to the next age. Egypt's own traditions fit that pattern. The mythic age before the pharaohs, the era of Zep-Tepi, described a time when divine beings ruled, teaching humanity the arts of civilization. Then came catastrophe, chaos, darkness, and flood before order was restored. To later Egyptians, Zep-Tepi was sacred history, a symbol of renewal. To modern readers, it might sound like a coded remembrance of something real, an echo of upheaval filtered through time and belief. Archaeological hints suggest that the transition between Egypt's prehistoric and dynastic periods was marked by environmental change, shifts in rainfall patterns, droughts alternating with floods, and the gradual desiccation of once fertile lands. People who had lived as nomads became settlers, gathering near the Nile because it was the only reliable source of water left. That concentration of population accelerated innovation, farming, architecture, governance, but it also carried with it a shared trauma. Civilizations are built not just on abundance, but on adaptation. When we look at the pyramids through that lens, they begin to take on a different meaning. Not merely tombs or symbols of power, but statements of permanence in a world that had already proven fragile. After centuries of climate change and migration, building something eternal was more than devotion. It was a response. The flood had taken their past. The pyramid was their promise that it would not take their future. Even their choice of location speaks to that memory. The Giza Plateau stands above the flood plain. It's stable, elevated, immune to seasonal inundation. To build, there was to claim safety from the waters. The pyramid shape rising from a square base mirrors the myth of the first land emerging from the primordial sea. Every block of stone stacked upward was an act of defiance against oblivion. In some sense, every great monument is born of loss. We build to remember what might otherwise be forgotten. For the Egyptians, the flood wasn't just a story about destruction. It was a law of nature, cyclical, inevitable, and regenerative. The Nile's annual flood taught them that water destroys and restores in equal measure. Each year, it covered the fields, erasing boundaries. And then, as it receded, it left behind fertile soil, ready for planting. That rhythm became the foundation of their worldview. Creation and destruction were not opposites, they were partners. Maybe that's why they saw the flood not as punishment, but as a pattern. When the ancient priests told of Zep-Tepi, they weren't lamenting an apocalypse. They were describing a reset, the return of balance after disorder. And maybe deep within that story, there lies an echo of an even older flood. One that wiped away not just fields, but whole coastlines. If any survivors carried their knowledge northward toward the Nile, they would have seemed like bringers of order after chaos, the first teachers, the founders of what would become Egypt. The possibility of such lost migrations has fascinated scholars and explorers for centuries. Some point to megalithic structures across the world in Turkey, Malta, South America, as evidence of a shared architectural lineage. Others see in those patterns nothing more than coincidence, a reflection of humanity's universal drive to build. Either way, the flood stands at the boundary between the known and the forgotten, a line separating one world from another. Geologists examining sediment layers around the Nile have found traces of ancient flood deposits far older than recorded history. Thick bands of silt and clay mark periods when the river swelled beyond its limits, submerging entire regions. Some of those layers coincide roughly with the end of the Ice Age, suggesting that Egypt too experienced the effects of the global meltwater pulse. To people living then, It would have seemed as if the gods had changed the rules of the world. Imagine standing on the edge of that transformation. The horizon filled with rising water, the land dissolving day by day. You'd see the world you knew fading, and you'd feel helpless to stop it. You'd remember the landmarks, the hills, the trees, and you'd tell their stories so they wouldn't disappear completely. You'd carry those stories with you to higher ground, shaping them into myths of survival, divine warning, and rebirth. That's how memory survives catastrophe, by turning into narrative. And perhaps thousands of years later, those same memories resurfaced in Egypt's sacred texts, disguised as cosmology. The flood that began creation wasn't just myth. It was memory transformed into meaning. By embedding it into their religion, the Egyptians ensured that the lesson of loss would never fade. If we look closely, the theme of water runs through everything they built. The alignment of temples with the Nile, the placement of pyramids above its floodplain, the ritual use of basins and purification, all echo the relationship between chaos and order, between flood and form. Even the word they used for creation, Kepa, comes from the idea of becoming, of rising from formlessness into shape. The scarab beetle rolling its ball of earth through the sand was a symbol of the sun rising from darkness, just as the world had risen from the waters. Every morning, every flood season was a reenactment of that first emergence. The Egyptians were not the only ones who remembered. The Sumerians told of Eridu, the first city built before a great flood swept it away. The Greeks told of Deucalion and Pyrrha, who survived the deluge and repopulated the earth. The ancient Indian texts describe Manu, who built a boat guided by a divine fish to safety. The Maya remembered a flood that ended one world and began another. Each story differs in detail, but shares the same essence, a destruction that resets the cycle, followed by renewal. Modern archaeology has traced some of these stories to real events. Around 5600 BCE, the Mediterranean is believed to have flooded into the Black Sea basin, an event so sudden and dramatic that it would have submerged vast areas of fertile land. To those living nearby, it would have felt like the world itself was drowning. The memory of that flood could easily have spread across generations and regions, adapting to local mythologies until it became universal. If there were civilizations along those ancient coasts, farming, trading, perhaps even building, their remains now lie hundreds of meters underwater. Scattered discoveries of submerged structures near India's Gulf of Khambhat or Japan's Yonaguni Ridge hint at human activity before known history. Whether those were cities or natural formations, they remind us of how much we've yet to uncover. The ocean hides its past well, and so the myth of the Great Flood endures, not as superstition, but as memory that refuses to die. For Egypt, that memory found its answer in stone. The flood washed the world clean. The pyramid anchored it again. One was movement, the other stability. Together, they formed the rhythm of existence, chaos and order, water and land, loss and legacy. Even now, when the Nile rises during its modern flood season, you can almost feel that ancient rhythm repeating. The river swells, brown and heavy with silt, spreading across the plains, then withdraws, leaving behind renewal. It's quieter now, tamed by dams and engineering, but the pattern remains. The same water that once destroyed cities now nourishes life. The same river that erased memory now sustains history. If the flood before the pharaohs really did reshape the world, its traces live not only in sediments and myths, but in the human instinct to build against time. Every civilization since has done the same. Raised walls, towers, temples, all trying to declare endurance against uncertainty. The Egyptians were simply the first to perfect it. They saw that the only way to outlast the flood was to build higher than it could reach. The night over, Giza deepens, and the wind carries a faint whisper through the stones. It sounds like water moving far away, an echo of the world's oldest story. that no matter how many times the Earth remakes itself, something remains. The pyramids stand as proof of that resilience. Their bases are rooted in the same ground that once held rivers, their peaks reaching toward the stars that have watched every rise and fall since. The sand shifts gently around their edges, soft as tide foam, frozen in time. Somewhere deep beneath, the memory of ancient water still lingers in the soil, a quiet reminder that even the driest deserts were once seas. And in that remembrance, the line between history and myth fades. The flood was real. The pyramids are real. And between them lies the story of humanity's will to endure, to rise again, to rebuild, to remember. The night sky brightens faintly with starlight, and the silence of the desert feels heavy, but kind. The flood is gone. The pharaohs are gone, but the story remains retold in stone. It's still there in the alignment of edges, in the patience of geometry, in the calm defiance of structures that have stood against everything the earth and time could offer. They keep their silence not to conceal the past, but to preserve it. Somewhere in that silence, the oldest memory of all is still flowing, the one that began with water and never truly ended. For most of human history, we've looked at the pyramids from the outside, the sunlight on their edges, the scale of their form, the way they seem to rise straight out of the earth's skin. But the longer we study them, the more we realize that their greatest mysteries may not be in what we see, but in what we can't. Beneath the millions of tons of limestone and granite sealed behind walls that haven't been disturbed since before history began, the pyramids hold spaces we still don't understand. It's strange to think that after more than 4,000 years of exploration, excavation, and technology, the Great Pyramid is still keeping secrets. Every era that has studied it has found something new. The first explorers entered with torches and chisels. The next generation came with compasses and ropes. Then came surveyors with theodolites, engineers with lasers, and scientists with muon detectors. Each time the pyramid gave up one more secret and then revealed another. It's as though the deeper we look, the more carefully it hides. The Great Pyramid's known passages form a simple pattern, a descending corridor leading deep underground, an ascending passage that opens into the Grand Gallery, and chambers above that form the core of the structure. But even that simplicity is deceptive. The tunnels are narrow, angled, and precise. Every block seems to anticipate the next. Every void seems intentional. There are hidden joints, sealed blocks, and shafts that end abruptly in solid stone. Some are no wider than a person's shoulders, yet they stretch for tens of meters through the structure. The deeper you go, the more you feel that this was designed as much to confuse as to guide. The first to reach inside was Caliph al-Mamun in the 9th century. According to legend, his workers broke through the limestone casing with hammers and fire, tunneling into the structure until they stumbled into one of the internal passages. What they found was emptiness. No treasure, no inscriptions, no hidden messages, just air, stone, and silence. That discovery was disappointing for them, but meaningful for us. It showed that the pyramid's heart was never meant to impress through material wealth. Its wealth was its mystery. Over the centuries, explorers followed in their footsteps. Napoleon's engineers measured every angle. Victorian archaeologists mapped the chambers and corridors by candlelight. In the 20th century, new tools appeared: radar, sonar, and most recently, cosmic ray muon tomography. Muons are tiny subatomic particles produced when cosmic rays collide with the atmosphere. They pass through solid matter, but slow down or scatter, depending on its density. By measuring how many muons reach detectors placed around or inside a structure, scientists can create images of what's hidden within. In 2017, a team using this method made a discovery that shook the field. Above the Grand Gallery, a steep corridor running upward through the center of the pyramid, they detected a void. It was enormous, about 30 meters long, large enough to hold a small aircraft. It had no known entrance, no visible connection to existing chambers, and no clear explanation. They called it simply the Big Void. At first, skeptics suggested it might be an artifact of measurement, but repeated scans by independent teams confirmed it. Something really is there. A hollow space, unseen and inaccessible. Whether it's an intentional chamber or a structural cavity remains unknown. For now, it's sealed behind thousands of tons of stone, silent and waiting. The discovery reignited a question that has never quite gone away. Are there still rooms inside the pyramid that we've never found? Some Egyptologists caution against romantic interpretations. The pyramid structure, they say, naturally produces stress relief gaps between stone layers, spaces that appear empty but serve to distribute weight. The king's chamber, for example, is supported by 5 such cavities stacked above it, designed to prevent collapse. The Big Void might be another of these, a byproduct of genius rather than a secret in itself. But others see something more deliberate. The shape, the size, and the location of the void all suggest intention. It mirrors the Grand Gallery in scale and orientation, as though the two form a pair. Could it be a symbolic counterpart? A hidden chamber built for spiritual balance rather than physical necessity? Or could it hold something yet unseen? An object, a message, or perhaps simply air preserved from the time of its construction? The idea that something untouched remains inside has a certain gravity. We've mapped Mars, split atoms, and peered into black holes. Yet beneath our feet, inside the most studied structure on Earth, there may be chambers no human has ever entered. The thought alone seems to slow time. You imagine the stillness within, the air trapped for thousands of years, the dust untouched by motion. It's not treasure that fascinates. It's silence, the oldest, purest kind. When researchers lower small cameras through drilled holes into sealed spaces, what they see is always humbling. Empty rooms, rough walls, fragments of plaster, no hieroglyphs, no gold, no signs of human touch beyond the builders themselves. And yet that emptiness feels deliberate, almost sacred. The Egyptians valued stillness as much as form. A sealed space wasn't wasted, it was protected. Perhaps those voids were built to balance the structure, not just physically, but symbolically to give it breath. Some believe the Great Pyramid functions like a body. The descending passage represents the underworld, the ascending, the journey toward the heavens, and the chambers, the organs of transformation. In that analogy, the voids and cavities are lungs, spaces where energy flows, where pressure equalizes, where the structure breathes. Whether the builders thought in such metaphors or purely in engineering terms, the result is the same. A monument that seems alive. Standing within the Grand Gallery, even today, you can feel that life. The walls rise steeply, smooth and symmetrical. The floor is lined with slots that once held wooden beams or platforms. The air is thick and cool, carrying a faint mineral scent. Footsteps echo in long, slow ripples. You become aware of every sound, every movement, as if the pyramid itself is listening. It's easy to understand why people speak of it as a living thing. Its silence isn't absence, it's awareness. The search for hidden chambers continues with increasing precision. New muon detectors are being placed in multiple positions around the structure, triangulating results to create clearer images. Engineers have proposed using micro-drones to explore through existing cracks, though permission for such invasive techniques remains debated. Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities guards the pyramid's integrity closely, as it should. Every exploration risks altering the delicate balance of temperature and air that has remained unchanged for millennia. Sometimes the best way to learn is to wait. While scientists scan for voids, others listen. Acoustic studies inside the pyramid reveal frequencies that resonate within specific ranges. The granite walls of the king's chamber respond to low-frequency vibrations, amplifying them. Some researchers think this was an unintended consequence of the chamber's dimensions. Others suggest it was intentional, part of an ancient understanding of sound and energy. Whatever the truth, the effect is undeniable. The structure hums. That hum has inspired theories from the cautious to the imaginative. Some suggest that the Egyptians used sound in construction, synchronizing labor with rhythm to coordinate massive efforts. Others wonder if resonant frequencies were part of ritual, chants and tones designed to echo through the stone, symbolizing the union of voice and matter. In that sense, the pyramid could be seen as an instrument tuned to the Earth's own frequencies, a metaphorical heartbeat of stone. It's a poetic thought, but not without logic. Every material vibrates, every shape has natural harmonics. The builders may not have known the physics, but they observed the effects. They understood that certain proportions produced harmony, not just to the eye, but to the ear. The same geometry that aligned with the stars could also align with the music of the physical world. When you consider that, the idea of hidden chambers takes on a broader meaning, not just physical rooms, but hidden dimensions of understanding, spaces of perception that open only when we listen carefully. The pyramid teaches through its silence, but also through the echoes that silence contains. It reminds us that mystery isn't always about concealment. Sometimes it's about attention. There's a story told by modern archaeologists who work near Giza. Late at night, when the site is closed and the desert quiets, they say you can feel a pulse beneath your feet. It's not literal, of course, just the mind adjusting to the stillness, the body tuning to subtle vibrations of wind, heat, and distance. But the sensation feels real enough to name. They call it the heartbeat of the pyramid. In a way, that heartbeat is the rhythm of the earth itself. Slow, steady, persistent. The pyramid has endured earthquakes, erosion, invasion, and yet it remains. It moves imperceptibly with the planet's shifting crust, breathes with the temperature changes of night and day, absorbs sound and releases it back as faint tremors. The stones expand and contract with the desert heat, exhaling tiny whispers of air through their pores. It's alive in the way mountains are alive. Through patience, each new discovery adds a note to that rhythm. The big void, the alignment of shafts, the traces of cavities still unconfirmed. The more we map, the more intricate the internal anatomy becomes. And yet, even with all our instruments, we still haven't reached certainty. The pyramid keeps part of itself hidden, not maliciously, but naturally. Some things are meant to remain quiet until the world is ready to listen. In the end, what we call a hidden chamber may not be a room at all. It could be the space between what we know and what we feel, the gap that keeps curiosity alive. The Egyptians understood that silence has value. A sealed chamber invites reflection. An unanswered question sustains reverence. To build mystery into stone was to guarantee that future generations would keep seeking, keep wondering. That's its own kind of immortality. If one day we do reach the big void, open it and step inside, perhaps it will be empty. No artifacts, no inscriptions, no surprises. Just the same quiet air that has waited since the last stone was placed. And maybe that will be the point. The chamber doesn't need to hold treasure to be meaningful. Its meaning lies in the act of discovery itself, in the centuries of patience and imagination it inspired. For now, it remains sealed, and the pyramid remains listening. Every wind that passes over its surface, every shift in temperature, every vibration from the earth below becomes part of its eternal dialogue. When you stand near it, you can almost sense that exchange. Not words, not sound, but presence. A structure that doesn't speak, yet somehow communicates more clearly than any inscription ever could. The search for hidden chambers will continue as it always has. We'll scan, measure, hypothesize, and debate. Some will say the mystery is purely physical. Others will insist it's something more. The truth, as always, will live somewhere between. Because what makes the pyramid remarkable isn't just what it hides, but how it hides. Not in darkness, but in plain sight, behind the calm perfection of stone that refuses to yield all its secrets at once. Night deepens again over the plateau. The stars above are steady, the air dry and thin. Somewhere inside that mountain of stone, air sits motionless in chambers no one has seen. Maybe it's the same air breathed by the workers who sealed it. Maybe it's the oldest silence left on Earth. If you could stand there and listen closely enough, you might almost hear it. The slow exhalation of the ages, the heartbeat of stone still keeping time with the stars. When we look at the pyramids today, what we see is stone, old, weathered, monumental. What we don't see is the mind that built it, the calculations, the experiments, the understanding of nature that made such perfection possible. Somewhere beneath the dust of ages lies a kind of knowledge we've only begun to recognize. Not mystical, not alien, but deeply human. Knowledge that came from observation, patience, and a willingness to learn directly from the earth itself. The word technology feels modern, but its meaning is ancient. It's simply the application of knowledge to solve a problem, to lift a stone, to measure a shadow, to predict a flood. All of that is technology. The Egyptians didn't have machines as we do, but they had tools born of experience, refined through generations of trial and error. Their science wasn't theoretical, it was live. The quarry, the workshop, and the river were their laboratories. What's remarkable is how much they achieved without instruments we consider essential. They measured distances without rulers, angles without protractors, and time without clocks. Yet their results remain among the most precise ever recorded. The pyramid's sides deviate less than a hand's width over hundreds of meters. Its base is nearly level, despite being cut into uneven bedrock. Even the joints between stones after thousands of years are tight enough that you can't fit a blade between them. That's precision we associate with lasers, not copper chisels. How did they achieve it? The answer lies in simplicity elevated to mastery. To level the foundation, they dug shallow trenches around the perimeter, filled them with water, and marked the surface where the water line touched. Water always finds its level, so the line it leaves is perfect. With that, they had a reference point no tool could surpass. To align with the cardinal directions, they observed stars that never set, marking their crossing points and drawing perpendicular lines from them. To ensure right angles, they used ropes knotted at regular intervals, forming triangles with sides in a 3-4-5 ratio, a shape that always produces a perfect 90-degree. Those methods may seem basic, but their results are exact. It's easy to underestimate the power of accumulated knowledge. The people who built the pyramids weren't discovering these techniques for the first time. They inherited them from earlier generations, builders of mastabas, step pyramids, and temples. Each project refined the next. Each failure taught something new. Over centuries, they developed an understanding of materials, weight, and structure that rivals modern engineering. They might not have written equations, but they knew what worked. And they knew why. Archaeologists have found copper saws and drills used to cut stone, often tipped with harder minerals like quartz or sand to aid abrasion. Some of the hardest granite surfaces show drill marks that spiral cleanly, suggesting the use of tubular drills with rotating motion. Whether that rotation came from hand, bow, or some mechanical aid is still debated, but the result speaks for itself. They could carve and polish granite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, into perfectly flat surfaces and symmetrical shapes. Even with modern tools, it's a slow, meticulous process. For them, it was craft, patience, and repetition, the quiet rhythm of human determination. And then there's their understanding of sound and vibration. The ancient Egyptians used resonance not just in ritual, but in architecture. Columns and chambers were designed to carry and amplify certain frequencies. In the temples of Karnak and Luxor, the layout itself seems to shape acoustics, guiding voices and chants so that they fill the air with uniform depth. That same principle echoes in the pyramid's inner chambers, where the geometry enhances low tones. Some researchers suggest that such resonance was not accidental. The builders may have noticed that certain shapes and materials respond to vibration, creating standing waves that sustain energy. If they use sound to move stone, as some legends claim, we have no proof, but that they understood its power, that much is clear. The Egyptians also studied proportion with almost obsessive care. They didn't measure beauty as we do by taste, but by ratio. Everything from a statue's dimensions to a temple's floor plan followed consistent mathematical relationships. The ratio of height to base in the Great Pyramid approximates the golden proportion, a relationship that appears throughout nature, from shells to galaxies. Whether they discovered it consciously or intuitively, they recognized harmony when they saw it. Their architecture wasn't just practical, it was mathematical philosophy expressed in form. That sense of proportion extended to the human body. Artists followed strict canons of measurement, dividing the body into equal segments according to rules that lasted for millennia. Even their hieroglyphs reflect systematic geometry. Each sign fits within an invisible grid, creating balance and rhythm across the wall. To them, order wasn't imposed. It was discovered, extracted from the world's inherent logic. Their grasp of astronomy was no less impressive. They tracked celestial cycles with accuracy rivaling later civilizations. The orientation of temples and pyramids reflects not only symbolic alignment, but practical observation. They use stars to measure time, predict floods, and plan agriculture. The star Sirius, whose rising signaled the annual inundation of the Nile, became a celestial clock tied to survival itself. To watch the heavens was to understand life. Over time, that understanding expanded into a philosophy of science that unified all knowledge. The Egyptians didn't separate the sacred from the technical. A priest was often a scientist, a mathematician, or an engineer. Their temples were observatories as much as houses of worship. The movement of stars dictated rituals. The structure of temples embodied cosmology. When they carved hieroglyphs, they weren't decorating. They were encoding data, names, dates, alignments, measurements, and ideas about the natural order. Their writing system wasn't just a language. It was an interface between thought and structure. Even their medicine reflected that precision. Papyri discovered near Thebes described surgical procedures, wound treatment, and detailed anatomical observations. They recognized that disease had physical causes and experimented with remedies drawn from plants and minerals. They practiced dentistry, set broken bones, and performed operations with sterilized instruments. Their knowledge of anatomy came from generations of experience, often learned from the same ritual practices that accompanied mummification. To them, preservation of the body was not superstition. It was an extension of their scientific understanding. That structure defines function, and that the body, like the pyramid, can endure if properly tended. It's easy for us to assume that knowledge moves only forward. But history is not a straight road. It's a spiral circling back on itself. The Egyptians reached levels of precision that wouldn't be matched for thousands of years. When their civilization declined, much of that practical knowledge faded with it. Stone-cutting techniques, astronomical methods, even their pigments. Many of these had to be rediscovered by later cultures. Some have never been fully replicated. It's a reminder that progress is fragile. When memory breaks, even wisdom built in stone can be forgotten. And so when modern minds look at the pyramids and imagine lost technologies, maybe what they're really sensing isn't machines or advanced science, but a kind of intelligence that feels alien to us because it was so deeply integrated with nature. The Egyptians didn't separate physics from spirituality or observation from meaning. They didn't need electricity or engines because they had time, patience, and an unbroken connection to the world's rhythms. That's a technology in itself, the ability to align human effort with natural law. Still, the temptation to imagine more remains. There are carvings that some claim show modern tools, shapes that resemble bulbs or aircraft, though most can be explained through symbolism or erosion. But behind those speculations lies a valid question. How much have we lost to time? Not artifacts, but understanding. Could there have been methods, materials, or principles that we no longer recognize because they weren't recorded in ways we'd expect? Knowledge passed orally, demonstrated in action rather than described in text. Skills refined through apprenticeship rather than theory. When a culture like that disappears, what it knew can vanish almost completely, leaving behind only the results, the precision we still struggle to explain. Modern scientists study those results with renewed humility. Engineers test replicas of pyramid blocks, experimenting with friction, leverage, and counterweights. Chemists analyze ancient pigments that remain vivid after millennia. Physicists model the airflow and temperature within the pyramid's chambers, discovering stable microclimates that could only result from deliberate design. Each new finding reminds us that these were not primitive people guessing at greatness. They were thinkers, experimenters, and masters of material knowledge. One of the most striking examples lies not in the stones themselves, but in how they were joined. Between many of the blocks is a thin layer of mortar, still intact after thousands of years. Analysis shows it contains a mixture of gypsum, sand, and limestone. But its precise composition, its ability to resist erosion while bonding at molecular level remains unique. Attempts to reproduce it often fail. Whatever method they used, it achieved a balance of flexibility and strength unmatched by later mortars. It's small details like that, invisible, almost forgotten, that reveal the depth of their practical science. When you step back and consider it all, the picture becomes clearer. The ancient Egyptians didn't possess lost technologies in the science fiction sense. What they had was mastery of what was available, an intimacy with their environment that allowed them to see possibilities we overlook. They worked with gravity, not against it. They read the sky instead of abstracting it. They shaped stone as if it were alive, understanding that patience could substitute for machinery. They built with time as their primary tool. And in that sense, maybe their greatest technology wasn't mechanical at all. It was conceptual. They understood that permanence comes not from resisting nature, but from cooperating with it. Their materials, geometry, and symbolism all flow from the same principle that to endure something must be in harmony with its surroundings. The pyramid is not an act of dominance over the earth. It's an act of understanding. If we think of knowledge as something buried beneath dust, then perhaps our task isn't to uncover ancient inventions, but to remember ancient awareness. The builders of Giza didn't need to know the language of modern physics to practice its essence. They lived by observation, feedback, and adaptation. They built experiments that could last forever. The pyramid itself is one of those experiments, a question cast into eternity to test whether harmony can survive time, and as the centuries have shown, it can. The structure still stands, almost perfectly aligned, still responding to the sun, still resonating with the wind, still revealing new insights to anyone willing to listen. Every discovery made inside or around it, every chemical trace, every geometric precision is not just evidence of skill, it's a conversation with the past. One that reminds us that human intelligence has always been vast, not bound by era or tool. The night air over the plateau carries dust, cool and faintly metallic. The stars are sharp. Somewhere in the darkness, the pyramid absorbs that starlight, just as it has for millennia. Beneath the surface, in its corridors and chambers, the temperature remains constant, the air undisturbed. The balance it achieved long ago still holds. That's what true knowledge looks like, not the kind that flashes and fades, but the kind that persists quietly, invisibly through equilibrium. And maybe that's the real lost technology, not something we haven't discovered yet, but something we once knew and forgot. The technology of patience, the science of harmony, the wisdom to build with nature rather than above it, those things don't vanish because they're impossible. They vanish because we stop listening. The pyramid, still standing against time and wind, is the world's oldest reminder that we once knew how. The desert grows quiet again, the air thick with stillness. Somewhere far below the sand, the remains of old quarries and workshops lie buried. Fragments of tools, traces of fires, fingerprints pressed into clay thousands of years ago. The people who left them are gone, but their understanding is not. It's still there beneath the dust, written in the lines of the stones they placed, waiting for us to see it, not as mystery, but as memory, a record of what human beings can do when they build with both intelligence and humility. For every civilization that rises, another eventually fades. The pyramids remain, but the people who built them, their voices, their thoughts, their daily moments of life, all of that has vanished into the quiet. We know their names through fragments, through carvings, through papyrus that has survived only by chance. But the pulse of who they were, the texture of their world, is gone. It's a strange thing to realize that one of the greatest civilizations in history left behind monuments that defy time, yet lost its own memory. Somewhere along the way, history closed its own book. For thousands of years after the pyramids were built, Egypt continued to thrive. Dynasties came and went. Art evolved, gods changed, empires rose around them. But even as new temples were carved and new scripts written, the understanding of what the earliest builders knew began to fade. By the time of the later pharaohs, the secrets of Giza were already a mystery. They walked among their ancestors' works and marveled at them just as we do now. They knew the names of kings, but not the methods of their architects. They worshipped the same gods, but had forgotten how to speak the language of the stars, written in stone. It's hard to pinpoint when forgetting begins. It never happens suddenly. Knowledge doesn't vanish in a moment. It erodes slowly like limestone in the wind. Each generation assumes the next will remember. Each war, each drought, each political shift takes a little more until the thread snaps. By the time writing was widespread, many of the old skills were already legendary. The Pyramid Age had become a myth inside its own culture. We often imagine ancient Egypt as one timeless whole, but it was a vast span of human experience, nearly 3,000 years from its first unification to its last native ruler. To put that in perspective, the time between the building of the Great Pyramid and the reign of Cleopatra is longer than the time between Cleopatra and us. Civilizations within that timeline looked back at the Old Kingdom with the same sense of awe and distance that we feel today. The builders of the later temples stood in the shadow of the pyramids and wondered how their ancestors had done it. When foreign powers arrived, Persians, Greeks, Romans, the forgetting deepened. Conquerors rarely preserve what they don't understand. They admire me, they repurpose. They build their own monuments on top of the old. Temples were converted, statues defaced, libraries burned. By the time the Roman Empire spread across Egypt, hieroglyphs had become unreadable, even to priests. The last known inscription written in them dates to the 4th century of our era. After that, silence. The language of stone went dark. For over 1,000 years, nobody could read the stories carved into the walls of temples and tombs. Travelers saw the symbols, but assumed they were decoration, mystical marks with no structure or meaning. Egypt became a landscape of mystery. Its knowledge is sealed not by malice, but by time. The Great Pyramid stood unchanged, but its voice was gone. The silence that followed became so complete that by the Middle Ages, people no longer believed the pyramids were tombs. They imagined them as storehouses built by prophets or fortresses of forgotten kings, or even remnants of a world before the flood. The line between history and legend blurred until they became the same thing. And yet, fragments of memory survived in small ways. Through stories told along the Nile, through measurements and calendars that still followed ancient patterns, through the continuity of daily life, farming, fishing, and honoring the river. Egypt never truly vanished, it just shifted its shape. But its oldest knowledge, the architecture, the mathematics, the cosmic alignment, retreated beneath layers of conquest and translation. By the time Renaissance scholars turned their eyes toward antiquity, Egypt was more rumor than record. When Napoleon arrived in 1798, he brought not only soldiers, but scientists. They measured, sketched, and documented everything they could. Their work reignited the world's fascination with Egypt, but at that time they couldn't even read a single hieroglyph. The walls of temples were covered in writing, but to them it was as incomprehensible as code. They could admire the artistry, but not the meaning. That began to change in 1799 when a soldier clearing debris near the town of Rashid Rosetta found a slab of black basalt. On it were 3 inscriptions, Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic. The Rosetta Stone became the key to reopening history's sealed book. It took scholars decades to decode it, most notably Jean-François Champollion, who finally unlocked the phonetic system of hieroglyphs in 1822. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the voice of ancient Egypt could be heard again. The silence lifted, but the gap remained. We could read the words, but we still struggled to understand the thought behind them. Because language isn't just vocabulary, it's worldview. The Egyptians didn't separate science from religion, architecture from cosmology, or human life from the divine. Their writing, their art, their mathematics all spoke in the same dialect of meaning. When that worldview disappeared, translation became only partial. We could understand the grammar but not the consciousness that created it. We could see the words for star, soul, and sky, but the connections between them, the logic that made the pyramid make sense, had been lost. That's the true nature of the great forgetting. It's not just the loss of facts, it's the loss of frameworks. We can rebuild techniques, replicate designs, even reproduce materials, but we can't fully step back into the mind that made them. Their world was one of patterns and correspondences, where numbers had moral weight and geometry reflected truth. To them, the universe wasn't mechanical. It was alive, participatory. We, on the other hand, tend to divide, analyze, and categorize. Somewhere between those two ways of thinking, understanding slipped away. This forgetting wasn't unique to Egypt. It happens everywhere. The same pattern repeats across civilizations, knowledge rising, thriving, and then fading. Libraries in Greece and Rome burned. The Mayan codices were destroyed by conquest. The written wisdom of Mesopotamia lay buried under layers of silt for millennia. The pattern is almost rhythmic. Humanity learns, records, loses, and rediscovers. Each cycle adds something new, but each also costs something old. The history of knowledge is a tide, advancing and retreating. What makes Egypt special is that it built something too large to lose completely. The pyramids became memory made physical. Even when the meaning was forgotten, the form endured. People could forget how or why they were built, but they couldn't forget that they existed. They stood as silent witnesses to everything that came after. Empires, religions, languages, and ideas rising and falling in their shadow. The stones remembered what minds did not. There's a strange comfort in that. Human memory is fragile. Entire cultures can vanish in a few generations, but the stone holds. The Great Pyramid has watched the world change beyond recognition. It has seen the night sky shift, the desert move, the city of Cairo grow around its base. It has outlasted its builders, its interpreters, and even its gods. And still, it waits. The Great Forgetting may have erased the language, but not the legacy. Even now, with all our technology, we can't fully recover what was lost. We can measure, we can analyze, we can simulate. But there's a difference between knowing the how and knowing the why. We can describe the mathematics of alignment, but we can't feel the sense of purpose that guided it. We can chart the orientation to the stars, but we can't hear the meaning in that alignment the way the builders did. That's what history loses when it forgets. Not information, but intimacy. And yet forgetting isn't always failure. Sometimes it's part of a larger rhythm. The loss of one understanding makes space for another. The rediscovery of Egypt in modern times didn't just restore old facts. It changed how we see ourselves. The idea that a civilization could be both ancient and advanced reshaped our concept of progress. It reminded us that knowledge isn't linear, that wisdom can be old, and that modernity doesn't always mean superiority. The Great Forgetting teaches humility. It reminds us that memory, even collective memory, is delicate, that every library, every archive, every digital record depends on context to remain alive. We can record data indefinitely, but meaning requires continuity, a chain of understanding passed from hand to hand. Break that chain, and even the most sophisticated knowledge becomes silent. The pyramids are what remain when continuity breaks. They are the hard drive of history, the physical backup of human ambition. But like any record, they need interpreters. Without the mind to read them, they're just geometry. It's our curiosity that brings them back to life. Every question we ask about them is an act of remembering, a reversal of the long erosion that buried understanding in the first place. And perhaps that's why they still hold such power over us. When we look at them, we sense not only mystery, but recognition. Some part of us remembers that we once knew how to think that way, in patterns, in symbols, in harmony with the world. The Great Forgetting may have closed one book, but it left another open. The pyramid is that book written in a language we're still relearning. When you stand before it, you can feel that history isn't gone, it's layered. Every breeze that moves over the stones carries dust from centuries of human presence. Builders, pilgrims, scholars, and travelers, each leaving something behind. Forgetting may erase details, but it never truly empties the world. Beneath the silence, memory lingers. It just waits for the right kind of attention to stir it again. The night grows cooler, and the stars above shift in their slow arcs. Somewhere among them, the same constellations that guided the builders still shine, their light falling faintly on the edges of the pyramid. The stones reflect it back just as they always have. The world turns, civilizations rise and fall, memory fades and returns. And through it all, the pyramid remains, patient, balanced, still holding the line between what we know and what we've forgotten. Perhaps one day we'll piece together enough fragments to understand not just how they built it, but how they thought about building. Until then, the pyramid continues to teach in its own quiet way. It reminds us that even when history closes its book, the story doesn't end. It's written into the earth, into the stars, and into the silence that waits for us to listen again. Every age believes it is the first to see the world clearly. Every civilization looks around and thinks that progress is a straight line, that the people before were simpler, slower, or somehow less awake. But the Earth itself seems to remember otherwise. Beneath the layers of soil and sediment, beneath the ruins and fossils and buried cities, there are patterns that suggest something older than our confidence, something cyclical. When you look closely enough, the rise and fall of civilizations begins to resemble breathing. Inhale, exhale, creation, collapse over and over again. The pyramids are one breath in that rhythm. They rise at a point in time when humanity had already lived through floods, droughts, migrations, and forgotten epics. The people who built them weren't standing at the beginning of civilization. They were standing at one of its returns. The Nile Valley wasn't empty when they came. It had seen other cultures, other languages, other attempts at order. It had watched the climate shift, rivers dry and lakes disappear. Each time life retreated, waited, and returned. The Earth doesn't move forward in history the way we do. It moves in circles. Geology tells that story in a language quieter than history, but far more patient. Every layer of rock and sand records a time when the world was different, when deserts were grasslands, when oceans were plains. Deep beneath Egypt's surface lie traces of tropical forests, coral reefs, and fertile floodplains that existed millions of years before any human hand shaped stone. The Sahara, now vast and empty, has flipped between green and arid multiple times in the last few 100,000 years. What we call ancient is only a recent chapter in a much older cycle. During those green periods, known as African humid phases, the Sahara was alive. People hunted along rivers that no longer exist, fished in lakes now buried under dunes, and carved petroglyphs of animals that could not survive there today. Giraffes, hippos, elephants, and cattle. When the rains returned, civilizations emerged. When they stopped, the people moved. The pattern repeated for tens of thousands of years. The pyramids were built near the end of the last humid phase as the desert once again advanced. It's possible that Egypt's rise wasn't just a beginning, but a response, the final flowering of knowledge before another cycle of scarcity. That idea that civilizations rise not from nothing, but from the remnants of earlier ones, appears again and again across the world. Archaeologists find layers of settlement stacked one atop another, each new city built upon the ruins of the old. In Mesopotamia, every mound of earth, every tell, generations of rebuilding. In the Indus Valley, the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro show evidence of planning and trade, then abandonment. In South America, cultures rise in the Andes, flourish and vanish, only for others to appear centuries later in the same places. It's as if humanity keeps returning to familiar coordinates, replaying the same melody with variations. But the question remains, why does the cycle repeat? Part of it is nature. Climate shifts force migration, disasters reset progress. Volcanic eruptions, droughts, disease and floods all rewrite the map. Yet, part of it is within us, a rhythm built into the way we grow and forget. Every civilization expands until it strains the limits of its environment, and then something changes. Fields exhaust, trade routes collapse, the social fabric stretches too thin. What follows looks like an ending, but it's really transformation. The old form dissolves so the next one can begin. It's tempting to see that as failure, but the Earth seems to see it differently. From its perspective, each collapse is a redistribution. Energy moving, knowledge dispersing, new seeds planted. When one culture falls, another learns from its ruins. The memory of tools, myths, and methods carries forward in fragments. People adapt, absorb, and rebuild. The Earth remembers through us, even when we don't realize we're continuing its memory. Modern science has begun to reveal just how deep that memory might go. Geological studies suggest that advanced climate patterns and perhaps even organized human activity may reach farther back than we've allowed ourselves to believe. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, built more than 11,000 years ago, show complex design at a time when we thought humans were still nomadic. Submerged ruins off India's coast and hints of ancient structures beneath the Mediterranean hint that parts of our story are still underwater, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. The more we discover, the less linear our history becomes. But even when the surface is wiped clean, something remains underneath. Call it instinct, call it pattern, call it the Earth's way of teaching the same lessons again until they're understood. The pyramids in this light are not just monuments. They're bookmarks, markers in the recurring story of human resilience. That might explain why they feel both ancient and familiar. They're echoes of an idea that doesn't belong only to Egypt. The idea that order can be built from chaos, that geometry can express harmony, that the human mind can mirror the cosmos. Those same ideas appear in cultures separated by oceans and millennia. The temples of Central America, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the mounds of China, all share the same upward gesture, the same conversation between earth and sky. Different languages, same intuition. The earth doesn't teach in words, the earth. It teaches in patterns, and humanity responds with the same answer over and over again. If we step outside history and look at ourselves as part of the planet's memory, the pattern becomes humbling. Civilizations may think of themselves as permanent, but to the Earth they're brief geological moments. And yet, within those moments, we build things that last longer than we do. That impulse to leave a mark seems almost biological, as though the planet uses us to remember itself. Every monument, every myth, every piece of preserved art is a neuron in the Earth's mind, firing across time. Some scientists have begun to ask whether traces of previous technological civilizations might exist beneath the fossil record. Not ours, but others that could have arisen long before humanity. It's speculative, but thought-provoking. If civilization is truly cyclical on a planetary scale, perhaps it's not the first time intelligence has emerged. Perhaps memory exists not only in biology, but in geology, patterns of carbon, isotopes, or minerals that preserve the signatures of ancient industry. So far, we've found none. But the idea itself forces us to see civilization as part of a longer rhythm, not an exception to it. Even without such extremes, the memory of the Earth is undeniable. Ice cores preserve the chemistry of past atmospheres. Sediments record volcanic winters and warming ages. Tree rings carry the rhythm of rainfall and drought. Every layer tells a story of cause and effect. How the planet reacts, heals, and resets. We are part of that feedback loop now. Just as the builders of Giza were part of it then, the climate that sustained them eventually changed. Ours will too. History doesn't repeat mechanically, but it rhymes through environment and adaptation. If civilizations are indeed cyclical, it changes how we view our place in time. We stop seeing the past as primitive and the future as inevitable. Instead, we recognize continuity, the idea that knowledge ebbs and flows, that progress is never permanent, that survival depends on remembering the lessons left in stone. Egypt's builders might have understood this better than anyone. They didn't build fragile monuments or fleeting empires of wood and metal. They built continuity itself. The Great Pyramid is a message from one cycle to another. It says, "We were here." We understood something about balance, about alignment, about endurance. It doesn't claim ownership of truth, it just demonstrates it. When we rediscover that truth, the cycle closes for a moment. Understanding returns, and the line between ancient and modern blurs. The same curiosity that once guided chisels now guides satellites. The same wonder that once traced Orion now traces galaxies. The form changes, but the impulse is the same. Some researchers believe that ancient myths of golden ages and cataclysms are the human version of the Earth's memory. Stories encoded not to preserve facts, but to preserve meaning. They tell us that order can return after chaos, that creation follows destruction. Those myths persist because there's truth in essence. Every generation lives through its own version of the cycle, building, forgetting, rediscovering. The story doesn't end, it turns. When you stand on the plateau at night with the stars stretching endlessly above and the desert breathing below, it's easy to feel that rhythm. The pyramids seem both ancient and current, both past and future. You can sense the weight of time, not as a straight line, but as a circle slowly rotating around you. The stars rise and fall, civilizations bloom and fade. But the earth remains the same patient witness, recording it all in quiet layers of dust and stone. Perhaps that's why we feel drawn to rediscover ancient knowledge. Not because we've lost it completely, but because it's part of us. The patterns the Egyptians saw are the same ones we still see in mathematics, physics, and art. The golden ratio, the symmetry of nature, the cycles of time. These ideas reappear because they're fundamental. We forget their form, but never their essence. The earth through us remembers. Even our modern advances mirror old ones. We build machines to predict weather just as they studied the sky. We map the stars, measure the planet's tilt, and align satellites with celestial coordinates, just as they aligned pyramids. Our technology looks different, but the motivation is identical. To find order in the chaos, to understand where we are in the vastness of time. Maybe that's the truest sign that civilization is cyclical, not in its disasters, but in its curiosity. And maybe the purpose of that cycle isn't to repeat, but to refine. Each return brings new insight. Each rediscovery deepens awareness. The Egyptians might have been remembering their own forgotten ancestors just as we now remember them. And one day, someone else will remember us. Not for what we invented, but for what we noticed, what we preserved, what we built in alignment with truth. The wind moves softly over the plateau, carrying grains of sand across the faces of the stones. The pyramids stand as they have for ages, their lines tracing the same geometry that guided the builders long ago. The stars drift above them, completing their slow orbits. Somewhere deep below the surface, fossils, sediments, and forgotten artifacts sleep within the Earth's archive. The planet's endless record of everything that has ever lived and will live again. The memory of the Earth isn't stored in words or images. It's stored in rhythm, in cycles, in the quiet repetition of form and dissolution. The pyramids are part of that rhythm, so are we. What looks like an ending is just the pause between breaths. The sand covers, the wind uncovers, and history begins again. Always slightly different, always the same. Night over Giza feels like something alive. The air cools in layers. The desert exhales the heat of the day, and the sky opens wider than it seems possible for a sky to open. The stars are sharp, quiet, motionless, but the longer you look at them, the more you realize they are moving slowly, patiently with a rhythm that matches your breath if you let it. Down below, the pyramids sit in their usual silence, massive but gentle, the way mountains might feel if they had been placed there by hand. There is no sound except for wind, the occasional call of an animal, and the faint hum of the earth itself. It's here in this stillness that everything seems to make sense. The weight of history, the persistence of memory, the endless cycle of rise and fall. If you stand close enough to one of the great stones, you can feel the night radiating from its surface. The limestone cools faster than the air, and it gives off a soft chill that seems to sink through your skin. You realize that these blocks have been seen every night since the beginning of recorded time. Every constellation that has risen, every moon that has drifted across the same sky has passed over them. For all the change the world has known, this place has stayed steady. The stones have absorbed every sunrise, every sandstorm, every quiet hour between. They've watched generations of people come to wonder at them, to measure, to study, to pray, to question. And still they remain the same, patient and unmoving, as if they know something we don't. There's something deeply human about that realization. The pyramids are not alive, yet they hold presence. They remind us that endurance doesn't require motion, that meaning can exist in stillness. Our world moves too quickly to notice that. Sometimes we chase progress, answers, and explanations. But when we stop, when we simply listen, understanding seems to arrive without effort. The pyramids don't explain themselves. They don't need to. Their purpose isn't to speak, it's to remind. The stillness around them is not empty. It's full of the weight of everything that has happened here. The work, the ritual, the imagination, the forgetting and rediscovery. If the air could remember sound, it would carry the voices of quarry workers hauling stone, priests chanting in the early morning light, travelers telling stories by fire. But time has quieted it all. What remains is the presence of those moments distilled into calm. When you breathe it in, it feels like stepping outside of time. And that may be the real secret of this place. The pyramids were not built just to last. They were built to create stillness, a kind of anchor in time. The same constellations that guided the builders are still there, though slightly shifted by the slow wobble of the Earth's axis. Orion's belt is tilted now compared to how it looked when these stones were set. The pole star has moved. The river has changed its course slightly over millennia, but the connection between sky and Earth holds. It's as if the pyramids have kept the coordinates of eternity fixed in one spot while everything else turns around them. That's the illusion of stillness, that nothing is moving. In truth, everything is. The desert winds reshape the dunes each season. The Nile continues to carve its slow path to the sea. Even the pyramids, as solid as they seem, shift by millimeters under their own weight, settling deeper into the earth. Yet from a human view, they are unchanging, like points of reference in the vast motion of the world. They give us something to measure ourselves against, a reminder that stability isn't the absence of change, but harmony with it. The builders must have felt that when they looked upon their work for the first time. The satisfaction wasn't just in what they had made, but in knowing it would outlast them. That is the quiet promise every civilization makes with time, to leave something behind that endures beyond memory. The pyramids kept that promise, not because they were perfect, but because they were aligned with the land, the stars, and something deeper that doesn't decay. If you listen closely, you might notice how sound behaves differently here. It doesn't travel far. It feels absorbed, almost swallowed by the desert air. Even a whisper seems to fall straight to the ground. It gives the impression that the world itself is listening. The sand, the stone, the atmosphere, all holding the sound instead of echoing it. You speak quietly without meaning to, as though anything louder would disturb the balance. The quiet isn't oppressive, it's respectful. The stillness beneath the stars has a way of making the boundaries between things blur. The separation between you and the monument, between the air and the stone, between past and present. It all softens. For a moment, you feel less like an observer and more like part of the same pattern. It's not something you can describe in words, it's more like recognition. The same recognition that must have filled the minds of those who built it, who saw their place in a universe vast but ordered, temporary but meaningful. Somewhere in that stillness lies a lesson we keep trying to remember, that not everything valuable has to move, change, or explain itself. The builders didn't leave messages on the walls because they didn't need to. The act of building was the message. To endure without speaking is its own kind of wisdom. The pyramid doesn't need to tell us what it means. It shows us quietly by existing. The stars overhead are far older than Egypt. They've watched the birth and death of entire worlds. Yet they shine on us now exactly as they shone on those ancients. The light that reaches you tonight left its source thousands of years ago, maybe even before the first block was placed. When you realize that, something inside adjusts. You stop thinking in days or years and start feeling in ages. The distance between you and the builders collapses, not through history, but through light. You're both standing under the same sky, separated only by the illusion of time. The stillness beneath the stars isn't just around the pyramids, it's in the sky itself. Space looks empty, but it isn't. It's filled with quiet motion, planets turning, galaxies expanding, radiation humming softly through the void. The silence isn't the absence of activity, it's the scale of it, too vast for the ear to detect. That same kind of silence exists here on Earth in the places that have seen too much time to need to speak. The pyramids are one of those places. They are the Earth's way of participating in that cosmic quiet. The longer you stand there, the more the distinction between human and natural fades. The pyramid isn't separate from the landscape. It rises out of it like an extension of the desert's own logic. It's both an artifact and geology. The stones came from nearby quarries. They are pieces of the earth rearranged into awareness of itself. The builders took what was beneath their feet and turned it upward toward the sky, uniting two halves of existence in one form. In that sense, the pyramid isn't just a monument. It's a bridge between matter and meaning, between the world that makes us and the world we imagine. As the night deepens, the stars seem brighter, but also quieter. The wind drops to a whisper, and the temperature falls another few degrees. The air becomes so still that even the faintest movement feels amplified. You can hear your own heartbeat. You can feel the slow expansion of your lungs, the subtle pulse of your blood. For a moment, the line between your rhythm and the Earth's rhythm disappears. That's the kind of silence the pyramids were built for, the kind that lets you feel connection instead of separation. The mind tends to wander in moments like this. You start to think about the builders again, who they were, what they believed, whether they ever imagined someone like you standing here thousands of years later, trying to understand them. Maybe they didn't think of the future at all. Maybe they were simply building something that felt right, something aligned with what they already knew to be true. Perhaps their understanding of eternity wasn't about time at all, but about stillness. The ability to exist fully in the present moment, to make that moment last by shaping it in stone. And in that way, they succeeded. The present they built has never ended. It's still here, replaying every day, every night, beneath the same stars. You can step into it whenever you wish. That's the strange magic of these monuments. They don't belong to history. They belong to the continuous now. They don't change because they don't need to. The world turns around them, but their moment never fades. If you turn away and look toward the horizon, you can see the faint glow of modern Cairo. The city hums softly in the distance, lights flickering, cars moving, people living their own busy stories. Life continues as it always has, fast, bright, temporary. The contrast between that motion and the silence behind you feels almost symbolic. The pyramids remain in the dark, patient and unlit, as if reminding us that some things don't need illumination to be seen. When you look back again, the stones are barely visible, just shadows against a darker sky. You realize that they don't need to be seen to exist. Their presence is so complete that vision becomes optional. You can feel them through the air, through the ground, through the quiet certainty that they're still there. That feeling is stuff. There's a comfort in knowing that somewhere in the world, something this old and this steady continues to be. It means that not everything we build will vanish. It means that our curiosity, our labor, our attempts to understand the universe can take a form that endures. The pyramids remind us that we're part of a story larger than ourselves, one that doesn't need an ending because it never truly stops. The stars above shift imperceptibly, drawing the night forward. The horizon lightens just a little, the faintest suggestion of dawn, waiting beyond the curve of the world. Soon the first rays will touch the limestone, turning it gold again, the same way they have every morning for thousands of years. The pyramid will catch the light, hold it, and send it back into the sky. The cycle continues night to day, shadow to brilliance, silence to sound. Nothing is lost. Everything returns. You take a slow breath, and the air feels cool and ancient. The silence around you no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like a presence, a living memory of everything the world has seen. The pyramids don't move, but they remind you that movement isn't always progress, and stillness isn't always rest. Sometimes stillness is the point. It's where everything aligns. Earth beneath, stars above, and the quiet mind in between. And as the first hint of light begins to outline the horizon, the night yields softly without resistance. The stars fade one by one, retreating into the brightening sky. The pyramids remain, patient as ever, watching the sun return. It feels less like a beginning and more like a continuation. Another breath in the endless rhythm of the world. The stillness beneath the stars becomes the stillness beneath the sun, and everything that was hidden becomes visible again. Somewhere in that gentle transition, you understand what they built. Not a tomb, not a temple, not even a message. They built a conversation between permanence and change, between silence and sound, between the human desire to endure and the earth's quiet agreement that endurance is possible. That conversation hasn't ended. It's happening now in the air, in the stone, in the stars that are just beginning to fade. And as you stand there listening to the silence, you realize that the pyramids were never meant to hold answers.